Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea.
Consume Prilosec. Got him. Got his ass.
Oh God!
That may be our best. Maybe our best start to an episode yet.
Welcome everyone to Jams and Tea Podcast, where you spin the jams and spill all the fucking coffee. God damn it! Today we're talking a new B-Sides episode coming straight at you live from Studio 54. We are talking about the Deft ones, them Deftones.
We are. That's the last time that a Deft Ones joke is going to be allowed to be made.
Yeah, we can't.
You've used it up straight away. It's gone.
Well, it's probably best I get it out of the way early on.
Just one more. Chino Moreno and the Deft Ones. That's all.
Well, it's hard to classify the good old Deftones because they have dabbled in so many genres without, I think, fully diving into any one of them fully and wholly. So they have just
I would call them an alternative metal band.
That's the closest thing I think you can get to, is that like they were born from the late 90s nu metal scene. That's sort of the appeal in which fostered their growth and did infect some of their music early on.
They were kind of there at the ground floor, actually, to be honest. They were one of the, not the first, but they were one of the early nu metal bands.
I mean, Adrenaline was 95.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I didn't even know it was that far back. So basically, they've been around for a long fucking time now, 25 years, which, for a fucking alt metal band, they don't have longevity a lot of the time. They're very, limited to a time frame, but the unique thing about Deftones not only is their genre bending, but also their incredible longevity, because I don't think you can probably find a lot of people who say that they're, the new stuff isn't as good as the old stuff, but I think they have maintained a solid through line of quality throughout their work in a way that most bands have not.
The thing that has really set Deftones apart from their alt metal contemporaries is their restlessness.
Mm-hmm.
They've always kind of pushed the envelope of their sound, even if it's subtly. They've never kind of rested on their laurels to a large extent. And I think generally most people love them now as much as they ever have. Like, Deftones never really dropped off. There are albums that some people like less than other albums, but I mean, with there being an incoming Deftones album very soon, everyone's really excited for it, and I don't
Which
think
is why we are covering them this close to that.
We all have pretty decent expectations, and they've been a band that really, by and large, have not let us down, or let their fans down generally. They're always restless. They're always interesting in the way that they construct their tracks. And always engaging throughout their career. So it's going to be really fun to talk about that progression.
Yeah, we are three very massive fans of this band. I can't think we might undersell that, but we are very, very big fans of this particular act. I've been a fan for God knows how, since I met Morgan. I remembered the first time you ever mentioned them to me was inside of a Steak and Shake. Do you remember that by chance?
No.
I vividly remember it because you're just like, you ever heard of Deftones? And I was just like, no, I don't think I have. And you're just like, they might be my favorite metal band. But this was, this is like 4 years ago, Morgan. So, that I'm sure that opinion probably doesn't still stand. But I was just like, okay. And then
it's probably second or third.
Yeah, they're up. They're definitely one of my favorite bands.
Were it not for Opeth, I'd have to sit here and think about it for a while.
Yeah, I would put Opeth above them, but then again, not by a considerable margin. And not to mention, they're just a very different type of metal than the metal that I used to. It's just that they do what they do so very well.
Yeah, definitely. They're probably, on balance, they probably are my favorite metal band, though I've not heard the vast quantities of metal that the two of you inhale. But I think they're pretty brilliant. The one comparison that always gets lobbed is that people call them the Radiohead of metal,
Yeah,
which is, it's always struck me as a particularly lazy comparison. But I also kind of get it as well, because
yeah, I do
there's a
too.
sense, like I've already used the word restless twice, but really, like, it's just this sense of continuing progression and pushing not only your sound, but also being at the front of a genre and pushing that genre in a different direction, that has had a lasting impact and
They
a
also
lot of
have a
influence.
comparable album run kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
Like,
and they both just kind of appeal, I think, to the sensibilities of the music journalism community as
yeah,
well. Like, whatever that means, like
but
whatever.
without being like, you're not gonna find any Kid A reviews of fucking Diamond Eyes or something. Like, this is a very straightforward band in their
Yeah.
appeal. Like, they are immediate, they are aggressive, they come out fucking
Yeah,
bat
but
swinging.
there is also just a lot of shades to their sound. There's stuff that you
Hmm.
don't quite like. They're a band that's very rewarding to spend time with. Like, none of their stuff, with the potential of their first album, is very surface level. Like,
No.
there is surface level pleasures to be had with Deftones records, but also once you kind of spend more time with them and really delve into them, you begin to appreciate how layered they often are, and how much work and sophistication there is in a lot of their arrangements for the relatively straightforward sound that they generally tinker and work with from album to album. But yeah, good
And
band.
also, most importantly, we did kind of skip over the fact that Deftones are known for basically throughout their whole career for combining a lot of their heavy, aggressive alt metal styles with that of shoegaze, which
Mm.
doesn't always show through on every album, but there's usually at least one or two tracks that'll slow things down or a track that will shift things up. They are very much capable of being a multifaceted band without being like heady or anything. They can still
Yeah.
do that.
In terms of the combination of shoegaze and metal, there's two specific bands that the band themselves have cited as direct influences, and that you can kind of see. You can see the influence of in a lot of their stuff, and that's like really early Smashing Pumpkins stuff, and also
Yep.
Hum as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yep.
those kind of bands who took this really kind of wall of sound, guitar tone, and just applied it to these really kind of otherwise aggressive arrangements. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
let's dig into
Yeah, I
it
mean,
now. Unless
we are
Morgan, you want to
jumping.
add something?
I was just saying we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here because
Yeah.
none of the things we just said apply to adrenaline.
No,
Yeah, that's the
exactly.
funny thing.
Let us begin. I mean, look, we all have to start somewhere. As
Everybody
bands.
does. And as we alluded to earlier with the Radiohead connection, this is perhaps the most apt one because Adrenaline is most certainly their Pablo Honey.
Yeah, it's definitely the sound of a band that are working within a particular aesthetic because it is the aesthetic that they've kind of molded themselves in, but you can tell they're not quite comfortable in it. And
No.
they don't quite inhabit the sound with the same kind of passion and genuine, I don't know, character that other bands in the new metal scene from this time, at least in my perception. I have limited knowledge, but it seems to me that Deftones were always, even from the outset, a bit ill-suited for new metal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get that reflected in Adrenaline, which is, I mean, I don't think it's a bad album. I think
No,
it's
I wouldn't say
fine.
so.
I wouldn't either.
I think basically you can get a pretty strong understanding of what Adrenaline's all about, all its strengths and weaknesses from the opening track Bored, which
Yeah.
is handily the best thing here and also just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The jagged central riff is pretty cool, and you're immediately greeted with Chino's trademark breathy melodic vocal style, which is always a lot prettier than you're expecting it to be. And it's particularly noticeable, that contrast here in this record and the next one. But the rest of the album is by no means bad, but it is very one note, and it's dull in a way that their other records simply aren't. what I think when I listen to Adrenaline is I imagine that this is what people who've never taken the time to sit down and properly listen to Deftones imagines that their music sounds like.
Yeah.
For every interesting guitar line or melodic lick as you might get on a song like Minus Blindfold, there's production that just sounds incredibly dry and lifeless. Like it's like listening to stale bread for 40 minutes, basically. The quiet, loud, dynamic range that's become a signature element of their sound is flirted with here, like on the unnerving mid-song breakdown during Nosebleed, and also on the ethereal closing track Fist. But I mean, they don't really kind of fully embrace that yet.
No.
They do demonstrate a talent for vocal hooks on tracks like The Lifter, for example. But then you get the rap rock aspect of nu metal that kind of rears its ugly head on a track like Engine Number 9. And I think that it's definitely for the best.
Yikes from me, dog.
It's definitely for the best. I think that the band dropped that aspect of the nu metal sound as quickly as they did.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so yeah, overall, I think there's some charm to be found here. And I do think that while the Pablo Honey comparison is apt, I think it's a little overstated because this is I think a more, still, while it is flailing for identity, I still think it's more fully formed than that record is, but it's just a form that doesn't fit them particularly well, and that they really, once you get a scope of the progression of their sound, it kind of feels like a footnote, really.
Yeah, it's like you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said dry, because that's sort of the main thing that sticks out when I think of this album, is that it's very dry, and that's a big problem because a lot of what I love about Deftones is their production.
It's like wet.
well, they look, Deftones make two kinds of songs about fucking and songs about killing the person that you want to fuck. And
or toaster bath.
Or dying. There's sort of that lack of identity is also here in like the songwriting too. Deftones are a band that deal heavily in, we seem to really like bands that have very odd and esoteric lyricism, even though it's pretty easy to identify what is happening here. But like on this album specifically, it's like the extremes that they would go to later, the things that made their writing so compelling, just it lacks a certain punch here, and I feel like it, as a result, just ends up being kind of limp. Like, I'm not above enjoying a straight up nu metal album. You know, I can tap into that bass primal part of my brain and just be like, yeah, let's fucking go. But the problem is, like Tyler said, they're just not particularly great at doing just that, and they clearly weren't experienced enough as a band to make that work. Like, if they did make a straight nu metal album, but did that, like, I don't know, 3 albums in, they might have been able to do something with that. But as is, this album does not hold a lot of appeal for me, and I would deem it to be the only record of theirs that is, like, mediocre and basically inessential. If you want to get and see where they started, do that, but listen to this album last. Like, don't listen to it before any other Deftones record, because it'll give you an impression of the band that is just not accurate at all.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to all that. I'm pretty much in complete agreement. I would say that it feels less to me like a band comfortable in nu metal, or a band uncomfortable with nu metal, and more like a band that just doesn't quite have the confidence yet to do the things that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is they just, like, they want to try more and push more boundaries, but they don't quite have the self-assuredness to pull it off yet.
Yeah,
and
I would agree.
You know, that's a lot of conjecture there, but what we know for certain is that this album is pretty mid.
Yeah,
it's hardly the worst debut I've ever heard. Hardly even the worst produced debut I've ever heard. but I would definitely say it's inessential. There's some charming little gems on here, but otherwise, listen to Around the Fur.
Exactly. Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to turn over to August to see what August thinks of this album. August.
Well, I couldn't be here in person for this B-Sides episode, but rest assured I did listen to every Deftones album multiple times. So I've got this, and I'm just gonna give you my opinions on these albums in this kind of phone-in type deal. So let's start off with Adrenaline, Deftones' first album. And on this podcast, we've reviewed quite a couple, like, first or second albums, like things like Sports Team or The Beths. And a note we've always made while discussing those albums is that it's not a bad thing at all to have a so-so debut. And I think this is a great example of that, because Adrenaline is the group's first and worst project. Adrenaline is, a lot of why it's not great is by virtue of context. The production kind of blows. It does not have the songwriting chops of the albums that follow it. The context mostly for why this is well, those next three albums, which are very similar to what this is going for, except all of those succeed at what this is doing, except way, way more. Pretty much every idea presented here is just frankly done better on any one of those three albums. Granted, I do find tracks like Bored and 7 Words to have a decent amount of punch to them, but the big detriment here is that it's just such a brittle sounding album. Like, I could just crinkle it in half, snap it in half like a twig. And I mean, really, it's just kind of unsatisfying to listen to, even a touch boring. It has its moments, but it is like my last choice in their discography.
I mean,
Damn, man, speaking, he do be spitting.
I pretty much agree with all of that.
Yep.
Just throw up the Chad yes.
Yeah, it's basically just echoing everything we said. Okay, well, should we move into our favorite tracks and ratings then?
Sure.
Okay. Fine. Jake, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Favorite tracks, Bored, 7 Words, and I'm kind of fond of Nosebleed. Least favorite track, I'll echo the sentiment of Engine Number 9. It's just a track that just does not work. And Light 5.
Cool. August, do you want to go next?
My favorite tracks are Bored and 7 Words. My least favorite would have to be, I don't know, something like Fist. And I would frankly give this album a 4 out of 10.
Morgan, your turn.
My favorites are Bored, minus Blindfold, and probably Nosebleed. And my least favorite is 7 Words.
Oh.
It ain't for me.
No, that is totally understandable. Have a nice day.
Not worth defending, really.
You want to say fuck a few more times, Chino?
So my 3 favorite tracks are Bored, minus Blindfold, and Lifter. My least favorite track is actually Fist as well.
Damn.
And I give this album 5 out of 10 is fair, I think.
Yeah.
Did I say my rating?
Did you? Say again?
I
don't know. Well, it's a light 5.
Ah, I see. Okay, so 5, 4.
See, and now that we have that out of the way, I think that all the rest of the following albums are albums that we have pretty, like, regardless of our stance and ranking of them individually, we have pretty passionate thoughts on.
Yeah,
for the most
some
part.
degree or another.
This will be a bit more, Dynamic.
Absolutely. So we move swiftly on into 1997, banner year in music, and Deftones, and no doubt had their own important contribution to that. Around the Fur arrives. Someone else want to talk about this one first?
Did No Doubt release an album in 1997?
Possibly.
I don't know.
I don't know where that
you
comes
just said
up.
you just it sounded like you said Deftones and No Doubt released in 1997.
No, I did not say that.
I thought you were like gonna go somewhere with that, and I was just gonna be like,
No.
what is gonna be the connection between No Doubt and Deftones?
I don't even remember saying that.
It's gonna be interesting.
Just cut. Just anyway.
Cut. Sure.
Yeah, so this is pretty much the biggest leap in quality from a debut to a sophomore album in the history of music.
I mean, it's a good.
It is a easy top 5 contender.
They're trying so much more. They're sort of leaning into. They're firmly still what I would refer to as a nu metal act at this point in time, but they're starting to play with typical alt metal stylings. I get a lot of post-hardcore vibes from this, especially like Quicksand, which is, pretty neat because the bassist of Quicksand joined the band after Chi died. But yeah, this is a phenomenal record. Does anyone else want to launch into it?
I have to agree in pretty much every way. I think this is adrenaline fully realized. I think there is totally a charm in this album because even though it doesn't check every box that the quintessential Deftones album would have for me, but it also ventures into an area that I think was worth exploring, sort of the fleshing out of the core of their sound. This is a very basic record, but it's not a record that is devoid of lots of creativity and ideas. Like, it immediately smacks you in the face with the opening, which is My Own Summer, in parentheses, Shove It, which, that title in and of itself is basically all you need to know. And it goes so hard. And kind of does oh god, it's such a great hook, but it also does the loud quiet dynamic thing you were talking about totally perfectly. The production on this album is so much better, but it's also it contains that rawness that Adrenaline had, or at least that it wanted to have.
I believe they were both produced by the same person.
Well, whoever did it, and then following 2 years got a whole lot fucking better at it. I also think that Chino's vocal performances on here are a league better. I don't know if that's more due to his voice growing or due to the production, because, Chino Moreno as a vocalist is a notoriously terrible live singer, but vocally speaking, on albums, when he can throw on some decent effects and performances and really hone it down to something really sharp, it's really special, and it sounds like that here. He's got kind of a wispy voice, but he can go into a blood curdling scream, and I live for that shit because Morgan and I love fucking Opeth, and that's all what they're about. And there's just lots of great tracks here. There's also just things that go harder than the rest of their career. Rickets, for example. Oh, what a fucking song. That's a post-hardcore song if I've ever heard one. And lest we forget the immaculate Be Quiet and Drive, parenthetical Far Away, which fucking rules. I also think the lyrical content on this album is astonishingly better, if very bass and primal, but it fits the aesthetic super duper well. Basically, Around the Fur is the final form of nu metal as a genre. It is as creative, as exploratory, and as interesting as the genre gets, but it holds all the same core tenets of that genre, and it leads to being a very awesome listen that really just doesn't relent. And I would also recommend listening to the final bonus track, if you can listen to it without the 20 fucking minutes of silence. I fucking hate that stupid shit. But it even has, like, that's a trend, by the way. Deftones bonus tracks almost uniformly slap. Just
even just B-sides and rarities. Their B-sides album's great as well.
And yeah, I love Around the Fur. No fucking shit talk from me. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to basically echo everything you've said, except I'll go into a little bit more detail. Because, yeah, this album, I've had a journey with this fucking album. I've had journeys with many of the albums we're going to talk about today. But this one, this one has been especially kind of sweet and gratifying. First time I heard it, I thought, yeah, obviously this is, because I went through there, heard White Pony first, then I went back and did the rest all in order. And so I was listening to this, like thinking about it as the bridge between Adrenaline and White Pony. And yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a step up from Adrenaline. There's definitely highlights here, but I wasn't really huge on it. But just over time, I've come to truly appreciate how perfect they get their early sound here. And I have to agree as well. Like if there are new metal albums out there that are like considerably better than this, I will be shocked.
Yeah.
Or at least, let me rephrase that. If there are new metal albums out there that I love more than this, I'll be very surprised. It's just so... the progression's immediately apparent. My Own Summer immediately announces the presence of Deftones fully formed, with an addictive descending guitar riff and a smooth as butter bass line. Where much of the aggression that on Adrenaline felt forced or dulled by the production, here Chino's screams of shove it, shove it, shove it absolutely slap and rattle their way into your brain. That energy is maintained with the even more violent La Habia, which pulses with a palpable tension. The very post-rocky Mascara sounds very similar to me to what their Scottish contemporaries Mogwai were doing in the very same year. And actually, this is not the last time that I'll bring up the Mogwai comparison.
That's a connection I never would have made, but that's a good one to make.
Yeah, like there are definitely some of the quieter moments on Mogwai's first album are definitely kind of the influence of that is definitely felt on a song like Mascara. And definitely that's another band that absolutely masters the quiet, loud dynamic, the sudden shift. And also finding a sense of kind of dreaminess in this crushing, oppressive loudness. But anyway, Mascara has this dark and brooding guitar tone that dominates the track and provides a bit of a reprieve from the album's aggression. Even as Chino's neo-whispered vocals are mixed really loudly in the song and add to its kind of horror movie feel. I love the way he says, "It's too bad that you're married," and then holds this pause and then adds, "to me." It's very kind of
that's such a great fucking moment.
Very kind of like horror movie feel. and then you get...
Just imagining Chino Moreno with a fucking Bane mask.
And then you get the title track on this album, which is just absolutely incendiary. Another dizzying display of their dynamic mastery. And it's the climax of the song just goes harder than any song that had come before it at this point in their career. It's just such a great track. Really fantastic.
Also, Abe Cunningham proving that he is the GOAT.
Oh,
True.
Totally. Everyone is fucking on point here. And then Be Quiet and Drive. Where the fuck does one begin to talk about Be Quiet and Drive? It's my favorite metal song of all time.
Hell yeah, that's a great fucking pick.
The dynamic range of this track, I'm going to say the words dynamic range until they lose all meaning.
It is not your fault for doing that. They play that trick up.
Yeah, that the violent noise of the solo in this track and during the breakdown, it sounds like torture. It's awful, but at the same time, like it's amazing. Just the way the riffs just hammer in this song, and it's like, ugh. It's disgusting and it's emotional. I love the way that they somehow miraculously in a song that's so intense, they find a way to increase the intensity as the song goes on, especially at the end of the song. The way that this fucking band managed to make a fucking fade out work somehow when it should not work. But the fade out of this song, the way that Chino kind of screams, I hope it's somewhere far, and then when he sings the last away, it just devolves into like gibberish basically. But it's like it's rooted in this sense of palpable emotion and just being completely overwhelmed by desperation basically and despair. It's just totally it's hard to listen to at times. Like if you're in a particularly emotionally vulnerable place, it really gets you, you know, or it gets me anyway. It's just unbelievable how good this song is. But yeah, and yet the album still manages to continue and maintains its energy. Like Die the Flu is another absolutely perfect Deftones track. Chino masters his melodic vocal sensibilities on this song, and I think that Die the Flu has one of his most impressive vocal performances on this album. I like also the way that the unrivaled intensity of Head Up devolves into a surprisingly plaintive ending that works better than it should. And then you get the ostensible proper closer, MX. It's not one of their better closers. It's probably the weakest song here, if I'm honest. There's call and response vocals in it that kind of I find a bit grating. But still, it's decent. And then you get Damone I consider Damone a bonus track, but it's still pretty good. Really strong. And I mean, it can't be understated what a quantum leap forward this is from Adrenaline. And as I've said, my knowledge of nu metal is admittedly limited, but this is comfortably the best record I've heard that adheres to what I understand to be most of the basic tenets of that genre, while still forging a distinct identity of its own. Also, as well, considering a lot of the other nu metal I've heard, it feels safe to say this has aged particularly well. It just sounds really good, and also doesn't sound as of its. It certainly sounds like a 90s record, but it doesn't sound as of its time as some of the other records from that era do. But yeah, just a phenomenal album. So good.
Yup.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, no hot takes from me.
Yeah.
We in our Jams and Tea group chat, we give the cover of this album an awful lot of shit.
It's a bad cover.
Yeah, I stand by it. It's a terrible cover. But if nothing else, it does portray what the album is all about.
Yep.
Which is just sort of just grimy, perverse, sweaty ass drug trip. That's just the tone for the whole album. And luckily they got that across far, far better in the music than they did on the album cover. Because this is maybe the Deftones album that has grown on me the most. I think all of them are journeys to some degree or another. But I think this one, even as much as last week, has kind of shot up some in my estimation. I think it's pretty much near flawless if it weren't for the last track and the 20 minutes of nothing that follows it. But yeah, this is such an absurd upgrade on Adrenaline that it's not even funny. Like all of the things that Tyler mentioned in the track by track, just co-signed completely. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Be Quiet and Drive is probably one of the first Deftones songs you'll hear if you go looking into them. And that's almost a shame just because you kind of have to start at the top there.
Yeah, definitely. I will say as well, I love the music video for Be Quiet and Drive is great and very 90s, but I very much hate that it's a radio edit and cuts off the song about 3 minutes in. That really bugs me because it's a song you have to listen to in its full form first. You shouldn't just jump to the music video and hear that truncated 3-minute version that cuts out like the best part of the song. But anyway,
Absolutely. That's like when I heard about that there's a radio edit for Viscera Eyes by the Mars Volta. Like,
what?
What?
no, they cut out like half of it.
That's weird.
That's disgusting.
I don't
And
like
that's a far more egregious example than
Sure.
even the Be Quiet and Drive example, but still,
Definitely.
perfect song, and changing anything about it is silly.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's turn over to August now and hear what August thinks of this album.
So, remember what I said about having a bad debut not being like a huge issue? That, like, it's not this indicator, this death knell that you're gonna suck for the rest of your career? Well, Deftones remembered that, because Around the Fur is an incredible effort from the group that balances their loud, full-sounding recordings and production with softer sounds that become a hallmark of the band's sound throughout their entire career. Around the Fur is Deftones' like loudest, most aggressive, and from my view some of their most passionate sets of vocal performances. Chino's signature screams permeate this album to give it just an overall oppressive feel. This is also an introduction to a lot of the band's core topics for writing, namely like isolation and sexual frustration. Songs like Be Quiet and Drive, Around the Fur, Labia, Mascara rank among some of the group's best work. These tracks have just an absolutely pummeling feel, yet are defined by emotional centers. And that's really what's just so great about this album, this dynamic between crushing and heartfelt. However, I do have some minor issues with the last track MX. I'm not crazy about the female vocals on there. They sound a little goofy, although they're far from the worst female vocals on a Deftones album, but we'll get to those, rest assured. Yeah, and then we've got the hidden tracks on here, Demone not being really all that special, and Bong Hit is just a skit. Still though, it's a fantastic album. I can ignore the bonus tracks. There are a number of editions that just don't include them. I mean, thanks CD era bullshit for that, but overall, every element of this album just feels like it comes together and it's just awesome.
Damn.
Yeah. By and large, cosign. I mean, I like Damone, but I guess I agree with everything else. All right, let's do our ratings then. I'll go first this time. Why not? My three favorite tracks, obviously, Be Quiet and Drive Far Away is my favorite, and then My Own Summer and Around the Fur. I think a pretty standard top three. Least favorite is
not a wrong one.
Yep.
Least favorite is MX, and I give this album 9 out of 10. Someone else can go now.
Well, my three favorite tracks are I Want to Be a Cool Kid and say Be Quiet and Drive isn't my number one, but, you just listen to it and you're like, fuck, all right, it is. So, yeah, Be Quiet and Drive, then next to the order doesn't really matter since I keep having to go back and forth on it, but Die the Flu and the title track. And my least favorite is MX, and I'm also feeling a 9 out of 10.
Awesome. Jake?
My three favorites are Shock and Awe, number 1, Be Quiet and Drive. And 2 is My Own Summer, again, shocking pick. 3, I'll say Rickets. And my least favorite song, MX, and I give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Beautiful. Okay,
Yeehaw.
August, your tracks and ratings.
My favorite tracks are Be Quiet and Drive, Around the Fur, and Labia if I had to pick 3. but I could really pick a wide variety. My least favorite is MX, and I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10.
Awesome.
Oh, damn. Let's go.
Yeah.
The boy.
Right. So, speaking of fucking progression,
Oh boy.
The OK Computer of metal.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a case for this as the OK Computer of metal or the Kid A of metal. Like, it's kind of
Yeah.
Basically, it just sits as a shining testament to the restless invention of Deftones as an act.
This is easily, I think, the most critically celebrated and probably beloved Deftones record. I think this is like what people think of as the Deftones album. This cemented them as the giants that they would continue to be, building upon their sound, experimenting with different things that would later be experimented with elsewhere that they did not play with on earlier records, and thus has become a landmark of the metal genre.
Absolutely. I think it is hard for me, I think, to overstate how important this record is, but also how well it threads the line between being an important record and also just fucking ripping. Like, it's very great. And I want to say, I might do my review first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I had a transformative experience with this album just last night.
Ooh.
So I've always loved this album. It was my first Deftones album. It did take a few listens initially when I discovered it. It doesn't quite like Deftones are not. Deftones are a heavy band, but they're not an immediate band, I think, in the same way that other kind of metal bands tend to be. Like I've kind of already alluded to earlier in the video, you kind of have to unpack their stuff a little bit, and you have to live with it a bit, I think, to really appreciate what's so kind of like strong about the way the songs are put together, and about how much they clearly care for, at their best, how much they clearly care for creating dense and layered mixes. And White Pony is an absolute masterpiece feat of sound engineering and musical layering in terms of a metal record. Like, there's so much going on this album that I am still discovering new things, and I still discovered new things last night. And it wasn't necessarily that I discovered a lot of new shit last night that was transformative. It was just that it finally like clicked for me. Like, it fully clicked, the whole experience from front to back, as like, okay, I really get it now. I get why this album is regarded the way that it is, and I get why it's so special. Above and beyond just being a great album, I get why it's a landmark record. And it's we talked about what a leap forward Around the Fur was from Adrenaline, and we kind of really, like, if not exaggerated, then we labored that point considerably, and that to a certain extent is a shame, because I feel that you can't really, perhaps the progression to White Pony is not as immediately noticeable, but to me it's every bit as impressive of a leap forward. And that's not to discount how good Around the Fur is. It's just to really impress how radical this is. So it demonstrates immediately from opening track Fear to Sierra. I really don't know how to say
I've
that.
never known how to pronounce it.
And of course, we are discounting Back to School, which was not on the initial pressing of the album, and so does not count as a song on this album. And the band
also doesn't want it on the album, which is why I never consider it.
They've basically disowned it. But I bring that up because I think most streaming versions of this album include it as the first track. And I want to labor the point that sucks and it annoys me to no end. And I want the band to do a 20-year reissue so that they can ditch it finally.
Seriously.
But anyway,
there are many releases of the album. I've never heard a version of the album that has it on it. So
okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So yeah, opening track Fear to Sierra. Immediately you get a more refined, subtle sound than Around the Fur. Still heavy, but denser and with a more layered and atmospheric mix. And I mean, there's so many great details on the album, and particularly here, listen to the gentle melodic reverb during the pre-chorus on this track. The way that the riffs shimmer more than chug, and the way that Chino's voice stays mainly in his more breathy and beguiling register. So immediately that's offsetting you if you're coming at this from around the fur. The track itself tells a haunting story of abduction from the point of view of the victim, and it immediately throws you into this world of dark uncertainty. And that, it's very emblematic as well of the darkness of a lot of the subject matter across the songs on this record. It's very, very much a nocturnal album in a way that their last two records weren't. This is a record, and I listened to this. Maybe this was part of the reason why it clicked, because I listened to this at like 1 a.m, and it just felt so seedy and just really unsettling, and just I get shivers running up my spine during a lot of the songs. Digital Bath is maybe the Deftones song. Like, it's the signature Deftones song. Debatable.
Inarguably, honestly.
It's the one everyone thinks of, or at least it's the one I think of when I think of the band. And it's effectively a mission statement for White Pony as a whole. I feel like more. 4 perfect, simple words to encapsulate a band that are reaching and striving toward a new sound that goes beyond nu metal, beyond the aesthetics and scene that they had outgrown. And to be frank, from what I can gather from interviews around the time, they regarded with contempt. And I mean, you can debate whether Deftones and Chino's attitude towards the new metal scene was elitist or pretentious, but it is, I think, fair to say that they did not care for it at all, and very few of their influences from this point onward come from that scene. So regardless of how you feel about that, it's just a simple fact, and it's not to say that White Pony is not a new metal album. There's still elements of that here, I think, and it still is, because of its context and its place in the historical story of the genre. It is inexplicably tied to it, but you can feel that it's actively, from track to track, seeking to move beyond it in a way that is much more ambitious even than Around the Fur was. Lyrically, Digital Bath is even darker than the opening track. You get this morbid story of electrocuting a girl in a bathtub and then redressing her, this horror movie imagery. And again, what's so effective about the song is that I did not realize that was what the song was about for a long time. It's very dreamy, it's very pretty. And that just makes learning what the song is about, I think, even more unsettling. I think Digital Bath to me is about as beautiful as a full-on metal song can get, and it's a perfect example of why beautiful is such a great and apt way of describing Deftones music. And the darkness of the song's subject matter is transposed to the music and the overwhelming aggression of third track Elite, which is Chino exclusively in screaming mode, though also you get this distortion and effects on his voice in the bridge of the song that are actually more akin to an electronic track. One of many examples of influences from outside of the metal scene bleeding into the record in a subtler way. The spacious and doomy RX Queen feels like a development of the similar atmospheric vibe of Mascara from the last record, but this has these booming and clattering drums that give it a vaguely industrial feel. Again, more influences bleeding in that you would not expect coming off of Around the Fur. If White Pony has one tiny weakness, it's that comparatively Streetcar and Teenager are not as compelling as the other songs on the record, but I still think they're pretty good. And I think that Teenager especially serves the record well as an interlude, much better than their other attempts at interlude tracks on later records succeed.
Teenager slander in this household.
Yeah, Teenager is great. It's just comparatively weaker than the other stuff, but it serves a structural purpose, and I really like it. And yeah. I don't
Is
have.
Is it weaker though? Is
I
it?
don't think it is.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe not. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful song.
Maybe your transcendental listen last night you need a few more of those.
Well, look, it's
You need
not
to
even.
ground yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I would still rank it above Street Cup if I was ranking the songs on the album. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
I don't have anything even remotely negative to say from this point on. Knife Party is an irreverent dirge that also pulses and thrashes. The addition of screams from guest vocalist Rod Lean Getzek is undeniably a nod to Pink Floyd's Great Gig in the Sky. But they feel particularly eerie here. And it seems to me like when I was listening to this track this time, it felt like they were the voice of some nameless victim that was being carved out open during the knife party of the title. Like it was not just a sexual metaphor, but an actual ritual sacrifice that was going on. It was a weird kind of effect that it gave me this time, which was really unsettling and just really kind of affected me deeply. And just, yeah, great song. Korea is the elite of the record's second half. It rattles and rips apart violently as Chino moans and screams about the various vices that he indulged in during the making of the record. The way that he screams, it's yours, it's your turn to come inside near the end of this song is just blood-curdling to me. That's another like full-body chills moment and like one of the darkest moments of the record. Like ostensibly this is a record about debauchery and sex, but it's a record that sings about them as though you're gonna die. Like it's as though sex is like equivalent to like a violent murder. Like
it sings about it like the world is going to come apart.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're in the middle of like a cocaine frenzy and you feel like your head's gonna split open and like every orgasm is like being stabbed in the heart. That's a bit ridiculous. That's a bit ridiculous, but like it's just I can tell that Chino was going for that with the way he kind of really just rips with his vocal performances here. And then you get, just when this record seemed like it couldn't get any more perfect, you get the last three songs.
Passenger.
Maynard.
Maynard is fucking right. Passenger is so good. Maynard's vocal performance here is arguably more compelling than his vocal performance on like 90% of Tool songs.
Like, arguably, try indisputably.
Oh, totally. Like, I was just being generous there. Like, where is this Maynard? Like, when we need him, when I'm listening to fucking Lateralis, which is a good album, but I would love it. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get onto Tool. Maynard's great here.
Nobody does.
He gives so much to the song. It's such an inspired choice to include him vocally on this track. Brilliant. And like the fact that the next two songs after it are even better is like stupid. Change in the House of Flies is maybe the band's second most signature track after Digital Bath. It was the lead single to White Pony. And I mean, just think about it for a second. That this was the song you picked to lead this record off. A great choice, but also an unconventional one. It's an auspicious indication of the future of the band as well. I think it's the song on the record that most looks forward to how they would progress their sound from here. It captures all the moody, unsettling but violent energy of the album, and it distills it into 5 thrilling, perfect minutes. My favorite detail of the song that I particularly loved on this recent listen were the gorgeous ahs on the chorus. They sound weirdly what they reminded me of, even though obviously it's the only aspect in which this band and this song reminds me of this band. But those wordless ahs reminded me of the Beach Boys of all things. But
neat.
Indisputably Deftones, and it speaks to like the way that, whether intentionally or not, they pull together all these different kind of sonic details that you would never associate with the band up to this point. And it's so thrilling. And I mean, this is about as far as the band had gotten from their nu metal roots up to this point. Cements their signature recognizable sound You don't have Deftones the way that we know Deftones today without Change in the House of Flies.
That's true.
And closer, Pink Maggot broods for 7 minutes. Listen to the way that Chino just kind of extends his vocal during the opening section, especially like just before the song fully comes in. It sounds like almost inhuman. And it's really kind of ugly and just breathy, but then screechy when he kind of goes wordless with it. I love his chilling whisper of "I'll set you on fire." You really feel like he means what he says. And the distorted screams that rattle through the background during this section, ostensibly a callback to Knife Party, but they sound different here, more alien. I think the adjective I wrote down when I heard this was wretched, and that really I think captures how it feels. But then the song itself kind of kicks into gear, and you get this kind of quite anthemic chorus. Despite the darkness of the song, Chino addresses the listener directly with the lines "transpose" or "stop your life." Basically a call to change or to die. And essentially, that's Deftones' ethos at its most distilled with this record. We move forward or we die. There is no point to us if we keep doing the same thing over and over again. This is the great leap that we needed to make for ourselves and to find our identity properly as a band. And I get it now. I get why Deftones. I get why White Pony.
A knife pony.
Knife Pony. I get why now. It just hit me why this is the record that it is culturally and just in terms of when you think of the great metal albums of like the last 20 years, I get it now, and I'm so glad that I get it now, and I love it. And I've spoken for ages on it, but I really had to say all that because it's such a good album, and I am so glad that we waited we were going to record this yesterday, viewers, but we waited an extra day, and I'm so glad we did because I needed to have this experience with White Pony in the middle of the night in pitch black darkness at my lowest, just letting this record take me to the depths of hell. It doesn't get much better than this.
I think it's in some territories in Canada, it's actually illegal to listen to Deftones before sunset.
As well it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that should go global, frankly.
The best word to describe what I consider the quintessential Deftones sound is nocturnal.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's all over. All their best records have that feel. Well, I think Around the Fur doesn't really, but it's still a great album.
Mine is penis.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead.
All the air out of this whole video.
I'm going to echo Tyler's sentiment here in that I fucking love White Pony. I think it is every bit as good as Tyler made it out to be. And the fact that I'm also glad that we did this sort of deep dive into it because my ranking of the Deftones discography changed quite drastically. I think that Morgan said it best when like each album is really a journey and you have to devote a lot of time and attention to it because even though, as Tyler said, they're very heavy records that hit you instantaneously, they're not always immediate. But for me, at least, White Pony was the first Deftones record I heard, and it's one of those records where I just never will forget the first time I heard it. I was working at a drugstore at the time, and it was late at night. I was working a closing shift, and it was like the final hour of that said shift, and I just turned that shit on, and I had no context for what the Deftones even were. I just knew that they were a band Morgan liked, and this had a very high rating on Sputnik Music, so I just threw that shit on, and once it was over, I just texted him and was just like, dude, that was that was the most perfect thing I've ever heard in my life. I think at the time I compared it, like, it was when I was far less musically versed, admittedly. It was one of the first albums that, like, defined and shaped my musical taste. But it felt very, Tyler alluded it to being very industrial, in that, to me, what it sounded like was if just Nine Inch Nails just did a line of coke, like a ferocious line of coke, and just took, like, the heavier parts of the Fragile and, like, Pretty Hate Machine, and then smushed it together and then made an album. And I wouldn't quite say that that's as on the money. It's more or less just because that was my musical experience back then, but it's not entirely dissimilar. I think there is an industrial tinge to this album. I think there are a lot of genre tinges. I think this is finally when the Deftones captured their sound, and sort of would use it and expand upon it later. That said, I think this incarnation of their sound is one of their most definitive. It is aggressive, it is mean, it is gnarly. There are lots of crunchy, fuzzy bass lines and riffs that just get under your skin, that are just disgusting and lurid, and you are here for it. And I can't undersell Digital Bath is a great fucking song, but one of my favorite things about the band is their loud quiet dynamic. But on track by track basis, they do this very well too. And the transition from the dark, mellow vibe of Digital Bath, where it sort of has that lonely dissonant, that boom, ba-doom, boom, and it just sort of echoes, and it's beautiful. And then it sort of like lulls, and then Elite fucking destroys the house you are in and takes you and chokes you until you are fucking dead. Elite is probably my favorite song on the entire album, just because this is the hardest the band ever goes. Maybe the hardest any band has ever gone, because it is just screaming wall-to-wall extremes, and you are just here for it. Like, the amount of times I just put this on in my car, and I'm just like, I just need something aggressive and dirty, and it just goes. And the
Grammy-winning song,
album,
by the way.
What now?
Grammy-winning song, by the way.
That's... Wow, the Grammys aren't totally trash.
That's right.
Holy shit.
I did read
that
yesterday.
That is a weird Grammy win, just because that is a gnarly fucking song. I didn't think that would appeal to people, but I've been wrong before. But as Tyler says, it is a miracle that this album maintains this level of energy, and truly, like, it has a progression to it where it feels like it only gets better as it goes on. And that final stretch, like, as soon as Passenger starts, and you're just kind of in it, and I really love, like, I think Maynard James Keenan, like, we shit talk Tool literally all the time, even though I love, like, 3 of their albums, and one of them is, like, one of my favorites ever, but we shit talk them constantly. And I do understand. I think Maynard James Keenan's a great vocalist, but he really doesn't tap into his potential in Tool in the way I think that he should. In fact, I think he does in A Perfect Circle far more than he does in Tool. But here, it's the vocal chemistry he has with Chino is beautiful, and I wish that this was flexed on other works of his, but as is, I can't really complain, because Passenger is a perfect fucking song. And just as an experience, it is, like, it is mystifyingly good. I think it is a landmark metal album for a reason. It basically blends every subgenre that they would explore in the coming years, in the coming decades of their sort of, career. And it does it so fucking flawlessly, just because Around the Fur, while a great progression and a great step up, is still a very... It is what it is, and that's what makes it good. But White Pony, it dares to be experimental in the ways that maybe Around the Fur wasn't. And if they had tried to do these things on an earlier album, it may not have panned out. So I applaud them for sticking to their strengths. But when they just went for it here, they managed to do so fearlessly. And as a result, it is one of the most consistently exciting metal records I have ever listened to. And it is just a testament to the quality of the band that this is not my favorite Deftones record anymore. It used to be for a very, very, very long time. Now it's not even my second favorite, but I would still consider it at least perfect or near perfect, and manages to be one of the just best experiences in this area of music that I've ever had. It never dulls itself. It never gets boring for me. And as a result, the hype that it is built around it is so well earned. And I think that it deserves its place in the musical canon. I love it to death. I've listened to it more than any Deftones record as of right now. I wouldn't say it's their peak, but I would say that you literally just cannot go wrong with this record, even if it is their first, and even if you consider this the peak, and it's all downhill from here, you're still gonna love this fucking thing. It's great.
Totally.
Yeah, in the most strictly literal of definitions, I am still a virgin. That said, in complete truth, I lost my virginity freshman year of high school when I heard White Pony for the first time.
And this album had its way with you. No protection.
You know, it's a funny analogy, but I think in some way it's flawed. Primarily just because this album gave me something, still gives me something that I don't think sex ever could.
That's true. This is what angry, drunken sex feels like, this album.
Yeah, but like, it has to be better than that. I'm sorry. Point is, I was 15 the first time I heard this. Might have been 14. I don't remember exactly.
That should be that's yeah.
And it was a process. Some songs were immediate, like Passenger and Change in the House of Flies. Those were all just stuff I immediately vibed with, and even Digital Bath, surprisingly.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a testament to how inhumanly perfect that song is.
Yup.
If people sometimes say that it's all downhill after White Pony, and I think that's it's illegal to say that.
Should be.
But I do almost agree, with one exception, that after Digital Bath, their career, it's all downhill from there. Not as a mark of quality on the rest of anything they would do, but in the sense of this is like they just perfected music. This is like across any genre, the ideal song. It's phenomenal. It's a genius inspired level of production, mixing, and sound design on that track. Like everything is pitch perfect, and that is not a statement that applies only to Digital Bath. It applies to just about every other track on here. Elite was one of the tracks that took me a little while to vibe with at 14 or 15.
Oh, yeah.
It's because, never had the shit beaten out of me before. So, you just kind of have to come to grips with that. And then once you do, it's the hardest thing you'll ever hear. And it's fantastic.
There's one Deftones song that I think goes harder than that. We haven't talked about the album it's on yet, but I'm very excited to talk about it.
Honestly, there are candidates that I could. There are many places my mind goes when you say that.
But
yeah. All the singles on here, all the well-known songs are, better than their, their level of hype implies. There's no possible way to overrate Change in the House of Flies. Just can't do it. Unless you are comparing it to, unless you're saying it's as good as a Dead Baby, but
I thought you were gonna say like unless you're saying it's as good as like In a Silent Way, but no, Dead Babies.
No, I mean it's about as good as In a Silent Way. Anyway,
fair enough.
That said, do have some minor hot takes here, but really just in the sense that I don't think this is, flawless. Because I just gotta say, I think the opener, the one that is not Back to School, yeah, that one. It's good. It's just almost everything else on the album just kind of towers over it in terms of quality. With one exception, that being Streetcar, which is just kind of, it's all right. I won't turn it off if I'm listening to the whole album. No skips. Hashtag no skips. But it's all right.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's turn over to August now and hear what August thinks of White Pony.
So, White Pony. Deftones' biggest commercial success, to my knowledge. I wrote the script without researching it, okay? When I first heard this album, it took me a few listens to, wrap my head around it fully. Because the genre tag of nu metal, which is often applied to this album, I don't think properly encapsulates the record you're going to be getting into, because White Pony hits the listener with a nice, diverse mix of soul-crushingly heavy and lighter electronic instrumentals, and really, Deftones' ability to create this great contrasts in terms of instrumental palette is a huge selling point here, although it can definitely catch you off guard the first couple of times you check this out. Granted, I find myself not really coming back to this one as much as their previous effort, because I guess I just find the cuts on there to be a little more impactful, and this album, I feel, also to its detriment, takes a song or two to get going, and that is made even worse by later additions, including the song Back to School, which I didn't include as my least favorite track, because if I did, that would be kind of unfair. It's a song the band hates. They didn't want it on the album, so I mean, really, I don't have a whole lot to say here. It's a great album, and I'm sure everyone else has done a better job at illustrating why than I. I mean, I do find myself slightly preferring Around the Fur, because I feel those tracks are a bit more emotionally immediate than White Ponies. Still, though, it's a great album.
I gotta say, I almost think Around the Fur. I almost prefer that album to this one, but ultimately,
Around the Fur.
I certainly get it. I don't have any ill will toward anyone who does.
I mean, like they're both great albums, and if you prefer one, you're just kind of cooler.
Yeah,
So.
I think every time I listen to Around the Fur, I'm like, okay, I want to rank this above White Pony, and then I listen to White Pony, I'm like, no, I can't. Can't. This is better, barely.
Yeah.
But
that's kind of how I feel too.
Let's do our favorite tracks and ratings. Jake, you can go first.
All right. Well, my favorite song on the album is, in fact, Elite. But I also have Digital Bath, which, it's basic. But do I give a fuck? No. And for number 3, I'd say Passenger. For least favorite, I'll side with Morgan and say that if I did have to pick a least favorite, I will say it is Street Carp. And I would give the album a 9.5 out of 10.
Cool. Let's do Jams and Tea order and go to August next.
My favorite tracks would have to be Change in the House of Flies, Passenger, and Korea. I mean, I still could throw on a bunch more. My least favorite would be Syria. I don't know. It's the first one. I don't know how the fuck you say it. Anyways, it's an 8 out of 10. Great album.
All right.
Morgan.
That's fair.
All right, Saoirse.
But you picked up on that when you just sounded stupid if you didn't.
That's fair.
Wow, you did it with the pause, and that was like even better. Wow.
She always says it like you've just like murdered her family or something.
Yeah.
That's fair.
At any rate, my 3 favorites are Digital Bath, Elite, and Teenager. Because that is not just an interlude. I will have you know. I want to set the record straight on that. That's a full-fledged song, and it's fantastic.
I didn't mean to imply that it was. I just meant that it served a kind of a purpose at the
song.
center of the record and kind of being a bit of a calm section. But top 3 is definitely a choice.
Yeah, it's the right one. Suck it. Least
My
favorite.
own summer. Suck it.
Suck it, suck it, suck it.
Okay, I'm definitely glad that Cheeto didn't go with that lyric.
And my least favorite is Street Carp, and this is getting an emphatic 9 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my 3 favorite tracks are Digital Bath, Change, and Elite. Yeah, Digital Bath, Change, and Elite. Nothing too hot there. And my least favorite track, probably Street Carp if I had to pick one. But regardless, I'm going to give White Pony a 10 out of 10. Which I would not have done yesterday, but I'm doing today.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Let's go.
Jake, did you give it a 10?
No, I gave it a 9.5.
Okay.
Yes.
This is where it gets interesting, boys.
So, Deftones. So White Pony is a smash. White Pony is a success critically. It takes, I think, some fans a bit of time to warm up to it, but for the most part, I think generally it's pretty immediately beloved. So it's not what I'm saying is it's not a record that needed a lot of time to acquire classic status. So, how do you follow that up? How do you deal with following it up? Like, how are Deftones going to progress their sound? And
the answer is they release another good record. What?
Yes, but what is interesting is that what's interesting about their follow-up, Deftones, which I believe was originally going to be titled Lovers, but that got changed at the last second. But what's interesting about the 2003 record, in terms of as a follow-up to White Pony, is that you might have expected, based on the progression of their first 3 albums, for Deftones on their 4th to continue incorporating a wide swath of influences and perhaps pushing their sound more in that dreamier direction. But what they actually do is create what I think, by and large, with a couple of exceptions, is their heaviest album. Maybe around the first heavier, but like to me, It's the most unexpectedly heavy album. It's actually, I've got the right word for it. It's the most oppressive album to listen to. There are very few reprieves in this record from what is to me a feeling of total oppression and just crushing loudness. and it's a misunderstood record, I think, as well. I'm not going to swing in with a hot take and say it's like a 10 out of 10 album or anything, because it's not. But I think that it is a record that is comparatively overlooked, and not really all that well appreciated or understood for what it's doing. I think that people probably were not, like I said, I doubt people were expecting Deftones to make a record as abrasive as this often was, and it would make sense to me if that put people off initially who were expecting something more refined, like White Pony. This is definitely and it's definitely one of those decisions that as a band you can make when you release a classic record. You can go back a little bit to an earlier kind of sound, but infuse it with a little more of the sonic development that you've displayed up to this point. So this is kind of like Around the Fur's darker, more twisted and upset younger sibling. Like it's there's a lot of gnarly ugliness to this record. But anyway, I went first last time, so someone else can go first this time. Morgan, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Yeah, this maybe aside from Around the Fur is the record that's been the most of a process in terms of understanding and getting to know within the discography, but subsequently is also one of the most rewarding. My takes on it aren't so hot that it lands in the upper half of their discography for me in terms of ranking, but I do think it's really valuable to put in the time necessary to properly get a grip on this album and get to know it, because once you do, it's one of, if nothing else, it's one of the most interesting metal releases of the century thus far. It's just in some ways, I think it's not much of a progression from White Pony, which kind of, on the path that they were on, it's you would think that the next album would be a sort of progression from that, but I think it's more of both it and Around the Fur's mirror image. It's the darker part of an already dark half, and it feels sort of unrestrained and like inconsolable in weird ways, but it's also capable of moments of startling beauty, even in its aggression. I think that in particular is best exemplified by opener Hexagram, which, I mean, kind of alien writes a song like that. What are you people? And it works completely. I think that song is amazing.
Yep.
Probably not even top 3 for me on the album. Needles and Pins is like My Own Summer's like ugly little brother. It's smaller, leaner, and meaner and weirder, and I adore it. So good. If I'm not mistaken, Minerva is the only single off of here to get very much traction.
There were only 2 singles. Minerva was the lead, and then Hexagram actually was the second single.
Yeah, that would make sense. I feel like if they were to make a Deftones greatest hits album, Minerva would be the only one from this album to make it on there, except maybe Hexagram.
Which is not to say that it should be, but just that it would be.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
A solid half of these songs should make it.
Again, Minerva, not even in the top 3. Not even in the top half of my favorites on the album, probably.
I love this. I love that Morgan has these deep cut favorites on this album, because so do I.
Yeah.
Same.
The album does admittedly hit a bit of I won't say a slump. It's just, I don't think it's as good as the 3 songs that come before these 2 with Good Morning Beautiful and Death Blow, which are still good, but they're kind of lesser. I enjoy them. Not gonna skip them, but lesser. I think Good Morning Beautiful in particular I'm underselling a bit.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites on the album, but I'll get to that.
That's why the album is so interesting, I think, is because, once you spend all this time with it, there's so many complex and different thoughts that you're able to have on it. Like, so far, all of our favorite tracks have been fairly uniform, and I think all of our favorite tracks for this are probably not going to be at all.
Yeah, more than likely.
Anyway, all that's picked right up with When Girls Telephone Boys, which is just that shit's evil.
Yep.
It's just, ugh.
There's a lot to say about that one.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Battle Axe, fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say about it. It's just really good.
Yep.
Lucky You is the only spot on the album that just doesn't really work for me.
Big agree.
It's fine. It's all right, but I feel like I could do without it, and the pacing of the album would be improved.
Yep.
It's basically the pink cell phone of this album, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's
not nearly as egregious as Pink Cell Phone is, but
I mean, like, not the worst song ever.
No, but like it's a failed piece of experimentation that really clashes with everything else on it.
Yeah, and it's in a similar spot on the album.
Yep.
Bloody Cape and Moana, I think, are good, but I also don't have a whole lot to say about them, particularly because they bookend anniversary of an uninteresting event, which is, I mean, it's breathtaking. Put on the Keanu voice.
Insert that gif of me doing this.
Yeah. It's
such an underrated song.
Head and Shoulders, my favorite track on the album. Top 5 Deftones in general. He's like, hey, you want to hear Chino Moreno and crew do Mogwai? Yeah, you do. Here it is.
You stole it. I was going to talk. I will still talk about it, but it is basically a Mogwai song.
Yep.
Yeah, because you know more about Mogwai than I do. I've only heard Young Team and really like that record. So you can talk about that from a more learned perspective. But
I will.
God, it's it's just gorgeous
and completely unlike any other Deftones song.
Yeah. From before or after this point.
Yeah.
Like, the only things that are like similar are like maybe Entombed, and even that has its moments of like crushing heaviness.
Yeah.
So it's just it's such a strange, wonderful anomaly for the band, and I am a big fan. Big fan of this album overall. It has a few more misses than, some of the two albums previous, but it hits more often than it misses. So it is golden in my book.
That is a great descriptor. And while I will say I'll be the devil's advocate on this one, I suppose, just because I know I'm not as hot on this album as you two are, that I definitely had a renewed appreciation for it when I revisited it. Really, the only significant portion that I have to add here is that I just kind of think that Lucky You, which I'm pretty sure is going to uniformly be considered the weakest track amongst the three of us.
That's the impression I'm getting. Yes.
Yeah, Lucky You, it's not a good song. I don't think it's particularly good. Definitely like one of the lesser Deftones songs. I think that this sort of like, with the exception of Anniversary of an Interesting Event, which I do think is an interesting little experiment that shows that even on their lesser releases, Deftones are still trying new things. But I think this final third of the album just really pales in comparison to the first two thirds. I think the first two thirds are as consistent as anything the band has ever made. I think the stretch from Hexagram to Battle Axe is fucking great. I will say that I think that Death Blow isn't quite as good as the songs that surround it, but a good song nonetheless. So it's like, it's great, but Lucky You, weak song, Bloody Cape, not a bad song. It's just, I just don't really feel like, I feel like it was done better later on a song specifically that it reminds me of on Diamond Eyes. And the closer, Moana, which honestly I think is my least favorite closing track they have. It's either that or MX. I'm not sure, but like it just doesn't really do much for me. And that sincerely,
Adrenaline notwithstanding.
Yeah, Adrenaline, because who the fuck even cares? But like that's it's just a real shame, because I do agree with the consensus. This album is better than people give it credit for, and it does have like, this is an essential listen if you like the rest of the Deftones catalog. Absolutely. 100%. It's just that it does drop off a little bit in a way that even other albums that like I wouldn't rank in the tippy top tier of my favorites of their work, like even on the like the more mid-tier albums or even the lower tier albums, I think that it sort of is more, it might be the most uneven aside from, of course, Adrenaline. But that said, I think it's bold that they went with a record like this after White Pony. I think it's bold that they self-titled it, especially just because usually it's like you self-title a record for one of two reasons. One, it is a bold and daring declaration of your sound and a statement as a band, or two, you are out of ideas and do not know what the fuck to call your album. And it's the former in this case. And I do think it is quite significant. It is a nasty album. It is like, it's not like Around the Fur is a particularly pleasant listen, but it's like a very, it's an energetic record, and this does have energy, but this is a brooding energy. This is a contemplative and dark one. I think the lyricism on this record is particularly strong. I think the songwriting, pretty much like since White Pony, they're just kind of on an upward trajectory of knowing how to write good hooks, but combining it with really interesting lyricism, and that trend continues here. So I think this is a record worth checking out, even if I do think it falls off in its final leg a little bit.
Fair take, absolutely. Okay, I'll go into my review now. So yeah, obviously I've made no bones about the fact that I really, really love this album. I think Hexagram rattles and scrapes with this disorienting swirl of screams and pummeling riffs. It's their most outrageous and surprising opening track, and it's such a daring choice to lead off the follow-up to an instant classic masterpiece like White Pony. This is how you do it. Needles and Pins, I don't have a hot take here. It's brilliant. Has this two-note
best song on the album.
Has this two-note central riff that rings and repeats like a siren beneath Chino's violent screams. I love that sound. Minerva is an obvious choice for a lead single, perhaps the only choice that would make any sense in terms of broader appeal. It's more straightforward, but it still has this majesty to it, which is really, really breathtaking. These waves of blissful guitar, these guitar walls are really massive on this song. You can really feel the influence of shoegaze and post-rock, particularly on this record. Bands like Hum and Mogwai, and not to mention like Siamese Dream era Pumpkins as well. Like you can totally hear it in the guitar sound here. The underrated Good Morning Beautiful has a sticky, memorable hook, and continues the oppressive intensity that hangs over the record. Following the more low-key, post-rocky Death Blow, which routinely blossoms into gorgeous noise, we get the album's standout track for me. And I think the single most intense and violent track that Deftones have released to date, When Girls Telephone Boys. This is basically a song where Chino does nothing but scream for 4.5 minutes. He does not let up, and what makes it so powerful is not just that he is screaming in a way that feels surprising and concerning, even when you've heard all of the stuff they've done previously to this, but like the lyrics to this song are really, really, they just really hit me really hard. Basically, it is a song about having come out of some kind of relationship with someone that was harmful, mutually harmful, but particularly harmful on the part of that other person. And basically the song is just this howl of anguish and pain, where you're trying to process the emotions that you feel about this experience, and particularly learning to deal with the fact that you are feeling incredibly mean about someone in a way that you are not used to feeling about that particular person. So I just love the way that this overwhelming emotion is basically reduced to Chino screaming something's wrong with you over and over and over and over again. It's just super emotional, and the way that he ends the song just basically, like, I run out of superlatives to a certain extent to describe how hard Chino goes vocally at times, but the outro to this song, where it's basically unintelligible what he's saying, but he's saying, I hope we never do meet again. But he's saying it, he's really like, you feel like some kind of demon has possessed him and is like shredding apart his vocal cords, like with its long nailed fingers. And it just sounds like basically it almost sounds like pure noise, but it's also very distinctly his voice as well. It's just, it's totally blood curdling. And also, like, another element of this track that I love so much, I mean, musically it's just outstandingly oppressive and loud, and listening to it in earbuds while I was walking the other day, it felt like I just genuinely, I didn't even have the volume all the way up, but I genuinely felt like there were cells dying in my ears because of the tone of the guitar on this track. But there's also layers to it as well. Something you might miss the first few times you hear this song is that there's a very subtle and haunting ambience that's layered over the heaviness in the second half of the song. It's like an incredibly faint, ghostly wail, almost as though it's the afterimage of the traumatic and abusive relationship at the center of the song, refusing to fade away. And that just adds so much to the effect of the song and to what Chino's saying. Like, it's such a subtle detail as well. It's mixed very low, and the guitars are so distorted and heavy that it's very hard to hear. But once I picked up on that, it was like, something shifted in me, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, like, Jesus. It's just testament to how much detail goes into Deftones, even when they're in a mode where it's just basically thrashing and going as loud as we can. We still pay attention to the detail in terms of the production and the layering. And When Girls Telephone Boys is basically, it's just astonishing. I adore that song. It's grown on me so much over the years. I think it's easily the best thing here. I like the way, anyway, I need to move on from this song now. The way that the incredibly textured layering of battle axe lumbers like a gigantic beast cements this album as the band's heaviest so far, and probably to date. I think it is certainly debatable, but I feel that way when I listen to it. It's heavy in a real, like Jake's already kind of mentioned it, it's heavy in a way that feels really brooding and also kind of pained. The decision to grant the listener relief from the overbearing noise with Lucky You is not inherently a bad choice in terms of album structure, but the song is a mistake. The noodling electronic experimentation really doesn't work. There are kind of
the electronic elements just.
There are kind of elements of it of the song that kind of could work if they were kind of used a bit differently, but it's just the particular combination of sounds on this track that just irks me, and it just doesn't come together very well at all. I do like, though, the way that Chino's voice, the low tone of his voice as he moans, "If you feel lucky," I won't lie, that does some things to me. He's very, very, he sounds good. Generally, though,
he sounds real good.
Generally, though, I think that in terms of serving this album, I think that it would have been better served if they had just said, "Fuck it, let's make it heavy, non-stop from start to finish." I think I would have maybe that would have respected. I would have respected that a bit more. Bloody Cape is a thrilling return to form, though, in terms of heaviness. It's one of the loudest songs on the whole album. It has these really towering riffs at its center, and they're really kind of just dizzying. And there's also a mathy quality to the staccato playing at the ending of the song. And again, you get Chino devolving into animalistic screeches at the very end. That's like all the best Deftones songs for me end with Chino making sounds that no human being should ever make, and it working. That said, even though I did say I would have loved it if this album had been pure heaviness from start to finish, I will say the piano and the more low-key tone of Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event is a welcome detour. It's a very clear homage to Mogwai. Morgan, you already mentioned how that reference seeming apparent to you, having only listened to their first album, Young Team. To me, this song reminds me of their third album, 2001's Rock Action. In fact, it sounds very similar to multiple songs on that record. And
what
I
a
have
title.
Absolutely, which it's funny that they called that album Rock Action, incidentally, because like only about half of it is loud and the other half is very quiet and beautiful. But anyway, it's much the same as this song. I have absolutely no doubt that album was on rotation during the recording of this album, especially considering this album was recorded not long after that album came out. But yeah, total influence. And it's like a rare instance where it's like the influence is very like egregious and clear, but at the same time, I don't like come away from this wishing I were listening to Mogwai. I still think the song works as a diversion for Deftones. Like in terms of when they go really experimental with their sound, it doesn't often come off, but it really does here. I love this piece of music. I think that Closer Moana is excellent as well. It's another song that's taken some time to grow on me. It's heavy, but it's also dreamy. Chino lets up on the screams mostly, but has the band maintain their loudness. And it forms a strong ending to an underrated album. Great album. My appreciation has thoroughly grown over the years, and it's definitely one I think that deserves more attention and more love generally. The fact that people consider it like a notable step down from White Pony is absurd to me. It's so great.
Agree.
Yeah.
Okay, August, what do you think of the Deftones self-titled?
First off, I want to say up front, overall, I do enjoy this album. It's a good album. It's dark and heavy, and it's exactly what you want from a Deftones album, hence why it's self-titled, I suppose. But I do feel that's also a bit of the problem with this album, because as a whole, I just find it's just going too consistently heavy, because after the first 3 tracks of them screaming their brains out, there's just 8 more tracks of that, and I can't really find myself getting all the way on board with it. I mean, it's likely under the influence of cocaine, which makes a lot of sense because this album feels very bloated by cocaine. It is the same number of tracks as a lot of Deftones albums, but almost feels twice as long at points. I mean, whether you're going through, like, some of these tracks just are large, bloated cocaine messes. Like, Death Blow or Battle Axe or Moana, which I think is particularly egregious for being 7 minutes long. And it's not until, like, Lucky You when there's anything remotely close to, like, a switching up of energy. And I did appreciate that moment on the album a lot. I mean, still though, cuts like Hexagram and Minerva are pretty great. But it's just the energy being fed back and fed back and fed back to you that makes this album feel almost like a little too much for me. Yeah, I don't really get on board with it, but it's fine if you do.
Okay, let's move into our favorite tracks and ratings.
Yeah.
I'll let August go first this time.
My favorite tracks are Hexagram, Minerva, and Lucky You. My least favorite's Moana. I'd give this album a solid 6 out of 10.
Most on-brand shit I've ever heard in my life.
Morgan, do you want to go next?
Might as well. You probably surmised that my favorite track is Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event. But that is closely followed by When Girls Telephone Boys and Needles and Pins. Least favorite, Lucky You. Rating 8.5 out of 10.
Good shit. I'll go next. My 3 favorite tracks, obviously, When Girls Telephone Boys is my favorite one. And then, again, I don't actually have any hot takes here. I'm just going to say Hexagram and Minerva are second and third, respectively. And I am tossing up between an 8.5 and a 9. But I've been generous generally, so I'm going to stick with an 8.5. Jake.
My favorite tracks are, first place, we have Needles and Pins, one of my favorite Deftones songs. Second, I'll go with, it's either Hexagram or Battle Axe. So I guess I'll just say both of those, honestly. And my least favorite is Lucky You. And I give the album a 7.5 out of 10.
Good shit. Okay. Whew. God, I can't believe it feels like we've been doing this forever, but we're only halfway through the discography. But mind you, I think that part of that is because we spent an hour basically on praising White Pony to the Heaven. So let's just move on.
Be like that.
Okay, so moving on to 2006's Saturday Night Wrist.
That's why I brought out the fucking tequila.
Now I get out the beaten stick.
Yeah, only Deftones is a band where Jake would have to bring out tequila for an album he still likes, but
yeah,
but
exactly
has to come down on negatively somewhat. Okay, so all right, Jake, why don't you go first?
Okay, Saturday Night Wrist is an album that was introduced to me under the sort of presumption that it's a grower. And that it's not an immediate record that you just kind of have to go with it, according to Morgan. So I did. And when I first listened to it, yeah, I was just like, this is good, but it just didn't hit me in the way the other Deftones records did, and that was like to be expected, and I just felt no immediate pull to go back to it. And now that I was more musically storied and experienced in many genres and in the Deftones themselves, I was just like, okay, I'm ready to give this album a fair shot to see what it is, because it's a little bit more scattershot in its ambitions than pretty much anything that's came before it. And I tried it out, and honestly, I had pretty much the exact same reaction, a slight increase in my affinity for it, just because the tracks that I liked, I appreciated more. But I just think Saturday Night Wrist is a really, really inconsistent album. I think that it has definite high points that deserve to be up there with the band's best moments. It has songs like, it starts off great with Hole in the Earth and Rapture. Great songs. It has songs like Cherry Waves and Xerxes, which are incredible. And then there's the rest of the album, which is varying in quality. And I'll start off, I guess this is the weird complaint that I have that apparently isn't super popular, but I don't like the way this album is mixed. On some songs, it really complements the vibe that they're going for. They have a way more of a shoegazy influence on this record, way more of a post-rocky vibe. The walls of sounds are large, they are crushing, they are heavy. And I like that occasionally. One of the things I'm not a fan of is how Chino's vocals are processed on this album. Sometimes they're really good. Other times they sound thin and scratchy and strained, and I don't feel like that complements the vibe that the songs are going for at all. And it absolutely contradicts it in a way that I just think does not work for me in the slightest. And lest we forget, the uncontested worst Deftones song appears on this record in the form of Pink Cell Phones. And the thing about this song is that I went back to it and I was just like, maybe I remember one specific thing being bad about this song, but maybe everything around that bad thing is good. And it's not. It's a terrible song. It has virtually no momentum, virtually no punch, nothing particularly memorable about it at all until the end. It's just kind of a wet fart of a song, and then it devolves into the spoken word piece at the end, which is notorious amongst Deftones fans. It's about unprotected anal sex, and it's about poop explicitly. They just say it, and I don't particularly get the choice there. Like, I'm not gonna try and go into an in-depth analysis of the song. I don't care. It doesn't deserve it. It's bad. It's gross. I don't care to listen to it. I don't know why it's on the record. I don't know if it maybe it serves a thematic purpose. But it doesn't work for me, and there's just so many songs here that leave a fucking void in my mind. Songs like Mine, the fucking Konami Code song, up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B, select, start, just absolutely washes over me in one ear and out the other. I like, if there is a least memorable Deftones song, not a worst, but a least memorable, it's definitely that one. Rats, sure, fine, whatever, I guess.
Dumpster fire.
Songs.
This is a dumpster fire section.
This is a dumpster fire of a section. I don't like Jay's opinion on this record. It's notoriously controversial. No.
Fucking Kim Dracula. It's fine. It's a good song, I
God,
guess.
you suck.
And then, oh, fuck you. And then there's Riviere, which I just don't remember a goddamn thing about, mainly because it's sandwiched between a slightly more memorable song in Kim Dracula that I at least remember the fucking chorus to that song, and the bonus track, which is their cover of Drive, which is, I mean, it's cheating, but that's my favorite song on the record because I think it's a genuinely outstanding cover that just absolutely plays to the strengths of, like, all of the things that make their sound really unique. It makes it a very intimate song. It starts out with this sort of stuttering that I find really I find charming, and it's just the vocal layer. It's not a heavy song in the slightest. It's just the lighter side, which I really appreciate. And that's the thing that I like about this album, is that it is an album solely comprised of risks. It is going for something very specific on every song. That said, it's basically like blindfolding me and putting me in front of a dartboard as to whether or not I'm going to enjoy, dislike, or even remember the song that is going on. I do think it has more good on it than bad. I think Hole in the Earth is great. I think Rapture's great. I think Cherry Waves is an interesting experiment that actually fucking works. And Xerxes also fucking hard as hell, really goes. But then there are songs like Combat where I just failed to fucking recall anything about them whatsoever. It just completely passes through me. And yeah, it's a good album, but it hits more than it misses, but really only slightly.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll jump in then with my own contributions. Then I don't have as much to say about this one as I do about some of the other ones that we've talked about so far. I do like it more than you, as I'm sure will not surprise you. But I don't, hate your opinions or anything. I do find some of them a bit baffling, but to each their own. Yeah. So Saturday Night Wrist is an interesting record. It is a move away from broadly a move away from the oppressive heaviness of the self-titled album. To me, it feels like this is kind of the record that, in some ways, partly the record you might expect them to have made directly after White Pony, especially because in certain aspects it does continue the kind of drug-laden atmosphere of that album in terms of feeling really kind of like seedy, and it's all over this. But I mean, for the most part, I think that it's a triumph. I mean, let's just bask for a second in what a glorious opening track "Hole in the Earth" is. It
goes hard.
It signals that Deftones have moved away from the crushing edge of their self-titled to a still heavy but much dreamier sound here. It feels like an instant classic Deftones song, and it's such a great choice for an opening track. That is not to say that the album doesn't have oppressive moments. Rapture's battering scrawl, the effusive roar of Combat, and the slicing thrash of Rats, Rats, Rats all see Chino at his most unhinged, with his vocals in the latter song even approaching black metal screams at certain points. And if you don't believe me, go back and listen to it. It's quite jarring. The brilliantly surging Beware is just one of the band's best songs ever. I'm stunned that you didn't mention it, Jake, but I can understand. Chino's voice swirls across the mix on this song, and he's got such a beautiful range vocally here, and it's just really impressive. And then he just dips out completely towards the end of the song and leaves the band playing one of their heaviest and most crushing riffs ever during the outro. God, that song is just amazing. Goes so hard. And it's a perfect example of how Deftones can, when they decide to go a bit longer with their songs, they can kind of fill that length with plenty of different interesting ideas. The similarly swirling drumming that opens Cherry Waves has the dynamic spaciousness at the heart of Deftones music, and the song itself is really pretty as well. I think I want to shout out Chi Cheng's bass work on this track. I think is really nice. And the major key switch up in the third quarter of the song makes for a surprisingly uplifting section towards the end of the record. I think that the surge of underrated fifth track Mine is immediately apparent. And by the time the guest vocalist, Serge Tankian, arrives to provide a baritone counterpoint to Chino's ethereal singing, it's a fantastic dynamic that I think really adds to the song. It's clear they were going for a kind of like vocal companionship thing, the same kind of vocal companionship thing as they used on Passenger. And I think it's not as present here as it is on that song, but it works similarly well. I think the centerpiece, though, of Saturday Night Wrist, and one of the band's best songs ever, is the absolutely breathtaking Circes, which begins with these gorgeous, clean chord progressions that are actually quite surprising when you first hear them. And Chino singing about the passage from life to death. It's such a remarkably affecting and elementally gorgeous song. It's just so simple, simplistic. It's not terribly dense in terms of what it's about or in terms of what's going on in the song. It has that beautiful, bright, lush side and also the heavy side. Pretty much everything you could want from a Deftones song, while still kind of being surprising the first time you hear it. I mean, I don't really need to say anything about Pink Cell Phone. It's easily the worst Deftones song. It's more a failed experiment than anything. I do think Kim Dracula is a late album highlight. It pummels effusively with more of Chino's expressive and dreamy vocals. And I think Closer Riviere has moments of understated beauty as well as moments of addictive heaviness, a suitable mix to kind of sum up the album. It does ultimately, I think, feel a bit transitional though, as a record, between, in terms of it lacking, I think, if it does have a weakness in terms of holistically, it does kind of lack a bit of an identity that their best records have. I mean, I still think it's a great album in terms of but it's a great album because it has great songs, not because it feels like this unique and standalone statement in their career that says something special that only it says. Like it's just a great record because it has great songs on it, and that's not a problem. But it does mean that I can't kind of rate it up there with the best Deftones albums, because it's just not cohesively from start to finish as consistent of an experience.
Yeah.
Well, here's where the hot takes come in, because they haven't already started.
No, not at all. Not at all.
If we want to keep up with the Radiohead comparison, it's more like Deftones with White Pony released OK Computer, then released Amnesiac, and then right after that released Kid A. Because I think this album is astounding. It's gorgeous and nasty and gross in all the right places. Mostly all the right places. Because, you know, I would love to be the cool guy, vulgar auteurism reappraisal of Pink Cell Phone, 5 stars on Letterboxd, but, you know, I haven't taken complete leave of my senses. So, no. Awful song. It's a mistake. It should not be on the album. I have it hidden on my Spotify version of it, so it just goes right over it when I listen to the album. But I do admittedly find it fairly easy to forgive and look over, just because it's like barely even a song. I mean, it feels, if it wasn't so damn long, it would be like picking on an interlude. But, you know, it's
5 minutes long.
It's interminable.
It's nothing I can do about it. It's bad. But that isn't going to stop me from celebrating the rest of the album, which, with the material that's here, if it were not for Pink Cell Phone, this would be my favorite Deftones album. It's idiosyncratic. It's bizarre until you really get your fingers into it and like start thinking about it and say, this just makes so much sense for the band that, you know, is making it. Like in so many ways, it's a complete left turn, and in so many others, it's exactly what it needed to be and should have been. I mean, Xerxes just fucking top 3 Deftones.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Flawless. Absolutely soaring and gorgeous. Brilliant. The heavy stuff like Hole in the Earth and Rapture and Mine, which I will absolutely be sticking up for, because that song, ooh, it's good. Ooh, it's so good, especially when Surge comes in. Just it's nasty. Ooh, so good. Yeah, I'm a fan. Yeah, it's hard for me to take much umbrage with this album anywhere that isn't Pink Cell Phone. It opened me up to all sorts of worlds of interesting music beyond this. But even after that, I've never found anything that sounds quite like it. It's enigmatic and wonderful, and I love all but 5 minutes of it.
I really dig your passion for it. Like, if there's one thing that really makes me happy, it's like when there's a great band but someone's sticking up for like one of their lesser not as widely beloved records. Like I do love the record. I think it's got its issues, but I love that you love it so much. I will say another thing I wanted to add is that I did re-listen to it this morning, and I don't have an issue with the way that it's produced and mixed generally, but I will say they certainly do have records that are produced and mixed better than this. There are a couple of moments where I think it's a little bit of distortion peeks through that I don't think is meant to be there. It's not frequent, but I do think there are moments like that. It feels a bit labored at times, but again, I still really enjoy it. And there's just
it doesn't help that it's followed by debatably their two best produced albums.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. You're right. But I mean, I could literally, I don't like when I'm listening to Hole in the Earth, I don't give a shit about anything else. It's just
that's fair.
All I need
it's a good song.
Is that song.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the defining traits of it that you are either going to get on board with in some way or another, or you're just not. And, for all the shit I've been giving Jake because it's fun, completely understandable point of view. It's a weird, occasionally unlikable album.
And I am honestly, like, for as much as I don't dig a lot of this album, I am glad it exists because these detours were ones that were clearly worth making because they do strike a chord with people like you and Tyler, and Deftones just as a group in general need to make albums like this to prove that they are still capable of going outside of their own established wheelhouse.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we've reached a happy middle ground there. Okay.
Saturday Night Rest, Deftones, Confield.
No, well, like, I think going back to the Radiohead comparison, you were making like a linear comparison with White Pony is Kid A. Well, I mean, to me, like, White Pony is Kid A, then the self-title is Amnesiac, and this actually kind of does work for me as their Hail to the Thief, because it's kind of like
I can see that.
It's one of their longer albums. It's got a little bit of weird experimentation on it. It doesn't really have a fixed identity apart from a couple of overarching themes, and I like it a lot. Yeah. But anyway, let's turn over to August now. I want to hear what August has to say about
for real.
Saturday Night Rest.
Saturday Night Rest, the band's fifth album, and it is a major turning point in their career in terms of, like, their sonic palette. Like, quite frankly, after going from self-titled to this, it was just insane. So, because this is just such, like, a rich, nice, diverse palette of sounds, this album can be soft and heavy in equal measure. Songs like Cherry Waves and Mine are just show like a beautiful contrast, those two coming right back, like back and forth from each other. What am I saying? And I mean, then there's the first half, which is just filled with some of Deftones' best material, point blank period. Hole in the Earth, Rapture, Beware, Cherry Waves, Mine. It's just back to back to back, great song after great song after great song. Like, I mean, on my first listen, about halfway through, I was convinced this would be my this would be my favorite Deftones album by like a huge margin. And then I got through the instrumental, the Konami Code instrumental, which I was like, yeah, it's not exceptional, but you know, it's still pretty good. I like what they're doing here, how switching things up. Then you've got Xerxes, which is quite good, although I thought a bit redundant in the track list, but it's still an amazing song. Then we move into Rats, 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 and it's all right. And then we get Pink Cell Phone. What the fuck? This is the worst goddamn song Deftones have ever written. I cannot even begin to describe how bad this song is. You know, at first I thought, oh, it's only just the spoken word part that's bad. The first half's alright, but no, it's all bad. The first half just sounds plodding and ugly. Chino is singing about who the fuck cares what, and some fucking bimbo is just saying the refrain of belief in the one true God or whatever. It lasts for like 27 minutes or something, and then when you finally think the song is over, and the beat stops, it stops for an ungodly second, and then it picks back up for like an 18-minute spoken word section about butt sex and foreskin and how British people have bad teeth. It's just awful. And the worst part is, like, the band think it's just like the funniest thing ever, because you can hear them, those fucking chuckleheads laughing in the studio, like, during the spoken word section, and it's like, no, you fucking idiots. This is the worst goddamn song I've heard from ever in my life from a band I love. Are you serious? Anyways, Pink Cell Phone is a 1 out of 10 song. It is awful. It is fucking atrocious. Kim Dracula's pretty great, though. The other songs are just mid as hell.
Oh, that was better than I was hoping for.
It was a roller
Didn't
coaster.
disappoint at all.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to our favorite tracks and ratings then.
Yeah.
Jake, we'll do the same order. Jake, you go first.
All right, favorite song is definitely Xerxes, and then I'll say Hole in the Earth and Cherry Waves would follow it. Least favorite, I'm gonna not say Pink Cell Phones because that's such a boring fucking pick. I'm gonna pick
drive the dagger deeper into Morgan's heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say Combat least favorite, and 6.5 out of 10.
That's still actually kind of a bit higher than I thought you were going to give it, but...
Well, I was definitely accentuating the negative points just because I knew I was the only one who was going to be the naysayer of the group. So, like, the rest of the album is good and worth listening to. It's just that there's a lot of it that I don't think is.
Okay, well, I'll do mine next. My 3 favorite tracks are Xerxes, Beware, and Hole in the Earth. My least favorite track is obviously Pink Cell Phone, and nothing even remotely comes close. I know. And I'm gonna give this album. I said my least favorite. I'm gonna give this album an 8.5 out of 10, same as the last one. Morgan.
Oh, right. This, Jesus, I have to pick. Shit.
Fucking.
Well, number 1 is Xerxes. Number 2, I'm gonna say mine. And 3, I keep going back and forth on Cherry Waves and Beware, but I think I'm gonna go Cherry Waves.
Hell yeah.
Least favorite is the one.
No, I don't know which one.
I'm not gonna say it. I want so badly to give it a 10. So but I can't in good conscience do that. So 9.5. Fucking
Okay. I think if someone watched this video and it was the only exposure to the three of us, and then you ask that person, what do you think Morgan's favorite Metallica album is? They would definitely guess And Justice for All.
Justice for All. Yep.
That sounds about right.
Because this is
I won't dispute that.
such
Begrudgingly.
an And Justice for All favorite Deftones album. Or not that you said it wasn't your favorite Deftones album, but like your love for this is such a like has that same energy, which I love. I dig that. It's contrarian, but not like contrarian. It's like okay, that's different. But then you explain it, and I'm like, okay, I completely.
It's contrarian, but not like fucking annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless I want it to be, which is also fun.
That can be. All right, August. Let's hear your favorite tracks and rating.
Favorite tracks are Hole in the Earth, Cherry Waves, and Kim Dracula. Least favorite is Pink Cell Phone. 7 out of 10. Are you serious?
Okay, so a couple of things worth mentioning before we dive into Diamond Eyes.
To contextualize this.
I'll let you do this, Morgan. You're more familiar than me.
Okay. Well, if we're going in sort of chronological order of events, Deftones had gotten to work on the follow-up to Saturday Night Wrist, what they were tentatively calling Eros at the time, E-R-O-S.
Reference to the god of love, I believe, in Greek mythology.
Yes.
Okay. Shit. Sorry, I'm floundering here. I'm just a lot of information in my brain at once. Anyway, it was at this point during the process that tragedy struck, and Chi Chang, the bassist for the band, was rendered comatose for several years by a car accident, which is it later took his life after the release of Koi No Yokan. So in the wake of this, the group felt that Eros wasn't exactly representative of where they were as a band and as people, as an artistic statement. So they decided to scrap it altogether. It was almost done, I think. Only one song from Eros has been released. I think it was released sometime after Koi no Yokan. It's called Smile. And top 10 Deftones tracks, if you haven't heard it, phenomenal. I fully understand the band's decision to not go forward with Eros, considering the context, but it is only the second most tragic thing to come out of the whole affair. That said, the band released Diamond Eyes in 2010 with Sergio Vega of former Quicksand fame handling bass duties. And this is probably the second most highly regarded Deftones album behind White Pony, I would say. Yeah. Anybody?
I mean,
Except it's better.
Oh, Jake, is that you saying you want to get into this?
Sure.
Go for it.
I think Diamond Eyes is the quintessential Deftones album. And I know I may have sounded like I wanted to say that about White Pony, but I think Diamond Eyes is sort of the intersection of all of the eras of their music in a way. This was not always my favorite Deftones album. I always really, really, really liked it. But with all great records, I feel like there is a time where you need to spend with something to truly unravel its layers. And really the layers in question here are the production. When I think of what I like about Deftones' sound, I think of fucking Diamond Eyes, because this album sounds incredible. There is sort of now that the newer wave of Deftones albums that begins here, there is a polish, a pristineness to the sound. There is sort of an electronic element that is a lot more present in the sound. And there is a vastness to it that is immediately apparent on the title track and the opener, which is Diamond Eyes, which is like, again, top tier Deftones song. It's like just the immediate fucking just heaviness where we have Chino crying out, and then it bursts into the chorus like really early, and it's just the fucking it feels like you are literally watching a sky of diamonds as the lyrics invoke. And the album just doesn't fucking lose any steam after that. Royal is a fucking banger of a track. It goes even harder than Diamond Eyes, which is, impressive considering how hard it goes. Command Control, I feel, elaborates on a theme that this album has of helplessness. There is a sort of theme of codependency on this album, of someone in a position of power manipulating someone beneath them, or even like a supernatural force invoked that is manipulating someone else. And Command Control sort of does this really well. It kind of plays with the dynamic of the sound in a really interesting way. And then you've seen The Butcher, which is a gnarly fucking song, and a really, really dark one too, which also evokes this feeling of a predator kind of stalking his prey. And you have songs like Beauty School and Prince, which I think are like, they aren't as good as the highest points on the album, but they bridge the gap very well. Prince is also another song that sort of feeds into the power dynamic sort of theme on this record. And then we go into Rocket Skates. Fuck! This song is awesome! The fucking refrain...
Deftones broke into my house, stole my Xbox, and had sex with my girlfriend.
And I let them happily.
I was happy about it.
And the fucking the blood curdling fucking just absolute banshee wails of guns, razors, knives by Chino is
walk with me.
Ferocious. And he his performance generally across this entire album.
Morgan just doing an impression of the owl on the cover there.
Yeah.
But Rocket Skates is an absolutely euphoric rise, and then it comes down beautifully with one of another one of their best songs, which is Sex Tape, which is a dreamy, beautiful... I like to think of it as the digital bath of Diamond Eyes. And in many ways, I prefer this song to Digital Bath just because of how dreamy it can get and how, like, overwhelming. This song feels like, because of the lyrics too, but it feels like you are lost adrift in the middle of the ocean in complete darkness, and it is just swallowing you. And there is a definite helplessness on this album. There is a definite, there is a feeling it evokes out of you that is mildly unpleasant, which I think might be a bit of a curve that maybe gets, that leads this to be, not preferred like White Pony is. But then we enter the final stretch of the album, Risk, 976 Evil, and This Place Is Death, which fucking owns maybe my favorite, only rivaled by something that we're going to get to later, maybe my favorite, one of my favorite 3-track runs in the band's history. I think 976 Evil is just an absolutely gnarly song. This Place Is Death is just a phenomenal way to close the album, and I would be remiss if I did not mention 3 bonus tracks. Do You Believe, Ghosts, and Caress. All fantastic, favorite of which being Ghosts, which has this really fucking frightening, ominous sort of chime at the beginning that just instantly sends chills down your spine and then just breaks into the song, and it is glorious. This album, it is as polished and beautiful as a diamond would be, and it is yet contains the ferocious energy that you would find on something like White Pony, and I feel like is almost a refinement of the self-titled in a way, because the genuine darkness on that album is brought to life here, and I feel like it can be felt and kind of seeps into you and is just generally so, like, the best way to describe this album is intoxicating. It is heavy, it is dark, and it will fucking pummel you. And it is maybe, I would say, it is not my favorite Deftones record, but I would say I would give it the award for the most consistently ass-kicking record they have.
Jake's favorite Deftones record confirmed, Gore.
Hey, I'm gonna come to bat for Gore.
Hey, yeah, you're not gonna be the only one. I'll just tell you that right now.
Well, you are going to be the only two. I'm just kidding. It's a decent album.
Well,
Anyway.
come to New Zealand and fucking flatten your butthole. I don't
Please,
know why that's specifically.
do.
I don't know why that's specifically, but that's yep.
Flatten it.
I don't know what that would entail. Like, I would probably flatten the rest of you in the process.
Diamond Eyes.
I have to pee.
That is fine.
Tyler,
Sure,
while
okay,
Morgan urinates.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay.
Yeah, go.
All right, sweet. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a hot take. Diamond Eyes fucking rules. Oh my god, so good.
I'm gonna pray.
So yeah, the opening track, I mean, it's just like instant classic Deftones.
To the edge where we all get off.
It's a poetic tribute, seems like anyway, it's a poetic tribute to then comatose Chi Cheng, as Chino sings, time will see us realign, diamonds rain across the sky, shower me, I can't sing, shower me into the same realm.
Into the same
realm. I think that's probably maybe the best chorus refrain in any Deftones song.
I will agree.
You know, if not, you know, it's up there. I like the way that the energy is maintained into Royal, which the last 45 seconds of the song, just they blistering, head-banging outro. Whenever Royal comes on and you get to that part of the end where the band just fucking go full ham on that riff, bruh, I'm weak.
Wet. Oh, we all
weak.
said it.
Yeah. I do think the record does have one faltering step, which is the weirdly nondescript and a bit lyrically silly command control, which I don't really care for, to be perfectly bluntly honest.
Get out. You're kicked out of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm gone.
That's just nasty.
I'm gone. It's certainly not like as low a point as Lucky You or Pink Cell Phone is, but it does kind of...
Yeah, better fucking not be.
It does stick out a bit for me just because like of the peaks that surround it. But regardless, it doesn't matter. We then get a stretch of 5 songs in a row that I think is one of the most impressive sequences in any Deftones album. A thrilling sonic arc unto itself that makes the 3 previous tracks seem like a warm-up to it, you know, and the 3 tracks that follow it seem like an extended outro in comparison. You've Seen the Butcher is this gloriously melodic metal. One of the band's best purely sexual songs too. It's not tastelessly explicit, but it is addictively erotic and enough through tone and suggestion alone. Total banger. Also great music video.
It's about fucking.
It do be about fucking.
Put on my David Thewlis, and I'm thinking of Ending Things voice. Like, that song's made for fucking.
Yeah, Jesus. Beauty School has an absolutely radiant chorus, like if staring into the sun felt like a warm hug instead of excruciating blindness.
Mwah.
Prince opens with a doomy bass lick that recalls White Pony a little bit, I think, and then gradually erodes into a heavy but more subdued chorus that's somehow more intense for its lack of high end. It just fucking rattles your skull with how deep the bass is. Rocket Skates is fucking Rocket Skates. I could never approach Jake's level of intensity in his adoration for that song. It's great. Sex Tape, however. Ever since Around the Fur, each Deftones album has at least one show-stopping, holy shit moment where it's immediately apparent that you're listening to one of their best songs. And here the standout of Diamond Eyes is unquestionably Sex Tape, a standout among standouts, a song about wanting to live inside a single moment, a single experience forever, and not ever wanting to deal with endings. It's an absolutely heavenly song, and it's a perfect marriage of their core heaviness and their dreamy aesthetic. In many ways, I think it is a perfect introduction to the band. Though the last 3 tracks don't quite hit the heights of that 5-song run, they're still absolutely great. Risk has this swinging, chugging riff and brilliant breakdown. Gorgeous effects on the guitars and vocals in the second half make it sound different, but distinctly Deftones. And then the last 2 tracks are peerless as well. I don't have much to add except for that they go. And that's all that
do in
matters.
fact slap.
It's a beautifully lean album too, Diamond Eyes. 40 minutes. It just flies by. It can't really be overstated what a perfect move this was after everything that had happened post Wrist with Chi, and then with abandoning a highly anticipated album that many people were probably thinking when they abandoned it. It was probably their masterpiece. Why would they do this? Understanding, of course, the context. But then you bounce back with a record like Diamond Eyes, and Ear Loss doesn't even matter that it doesn't come to be, because Diamond Eyes is good enough as a record statement on its own. Like, I can't imagine wanting something better than this, to be honest.
This album had every reason to not be as good as it is, and yet it is. It's a miracle.
It reminds me of after Deja Entendu, Brand New had scrapped what they were working on next because it had gotten leaked. And then that became Devil and God. And it's like, I mean, I can't imagine what you were working on before this is better in any way. So,
yeah, it's, what the fuck else is there to say about Diamond Eyes?
Well, why don't we hear from Oregano?
Yeah, let's hear from Morgan.
So let me look here. There are 19 albums that I like more than this, and that is it.
Oh.
So yeah, 20th favorite record ever. One of the most important, influential music listening in life. A perfect marriage of everything the band had done beforehand and more. It's even when bands make perfect records, it's rare that you get the ideal record out of them. Like the one that you sit there and dream up, and that one actually comes out. There's not an ounce of fat on it. There's not a second, not a note wasted. Everything from the production to the instrumentals to the sound of it is pitch perfect. I simply cannot overstate the level of quality here. I think it's the most immediate Deftones album, even considering how popular White Pony is. Just right out of the gate, it's just, I think the best word to describe it as a whole is powerful. Whether that be in its unfiltered heaviness or the surprising emotional complexity coming off of it in every aspect in one way or another. it feels similarly dark and at some points ugly as the self-titled record, but there's more of a sorrowful, morose bent here, which is quite fitting considering what happened in the years leading up to the writing of this. It's just it fucking flawless.
It's a
Agreed.
diamond.
Agreed. Okay. August, what do you think of this album?
Diamond Eyes. I'm sure at this point everyone's explained the backstory to this album about Chi Chang's coma and all, so I won't get into that. I will just tell you that Diamond Eyes is an album which takes the elements I loved in Saturday Night Wrist and it builds upon them. Diamond Eyes is a dreary, moody, longing album. Never in the band's catalog before has there been such a perfect fusion of their softer and louder elements. I find the blending of instrumental palettes here to be damn near flawless. The songs on here are easy to interpret as like being about romance or even like the potential and eventual loss of a friend. A yearning to capture these great moments people share together, but ultimately things being just far too fleeting to capture. It's just painful to listen to at some points. And I mean, gosh, if I have any negative words to say, I'm not hugely on board with the vocal delivery going on here in Command Control, but I get what it's going for, and I think maybe Royal it's just a little alright. But from the run from You've Seen the Butcher to Risk is just untouchable. It's a lovely album.
Damn.
I suppose that's the best we're gonna get.
The true uniting of the Jams and Tea podcast being with Diamond Eyes.
Francis the Mute type
I
beat.
suspect
Yeah.
this album may have our lowest standard deviation.
Yep.
Anyway,
I mean, could it be any less than Ride the Lightning?
I mean, of the Deftones albums. I just meant.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get into our favorite tracks and ratings. Morgan, you can go first.
Yeah. Well, my favorite track is Royal because August can suck my fat one. Just incredibly hard, but absolutely beautiful. It is the perfect marriage of the beauty and ferocity found on different parts of different albums before that, and I think it's ideal. That's closely followed by Jesus Christ. It don't miss. I'm gonna say
It don't.
See, I don't want to go too obvious like Diamond Eyes or You've Seen the Butcher. Even though, again, positively flawless songs. And but I think I'm gonna go Beauty School for follow-up.
Good one.
Good choice.
So good. And of course, Sex Tape, which I think is either the second or third Deftones song I ever heard. And my brain leaked out of my ears. And it's like seeing the face of God. It was like listening to A Love Supreme by John Coltrane for the first time, but in 5 minutes. If the song were a human being, I would marry it. My least favorite is Pink Cell Phone, and for rating, I'm feeling the strongest of 10 out of 10s.
Hell yeah. Let's go. Okay. Jake, why don't you go next?
Well, my 3 favorite songs are Rocket Skates, Sex Tape, and the title track. and my least favorite track is not fucking available, and this gets my first 10.
As it should be.
As it should.
Fantastic. Okay, August, why don't you go next?
My favorite songs on here are Sex Tape, Diamond Eyes, and Beauty School. Least favorite would have to be Command Control, and I'd give this an 8.5 out of 10.
And as for me, let me get the tracks up. So my 3 favorite tracks, Sex Tape is easily my favorite. And then I'll go Beauty School and then Diamond Eyes. I just realized that's, again, the basic 3, but that's what it is. So what? My least favorite track is Command Control, and this album gets 9.5.
Love to see it.
Big
Too low, but I love to see it.
Well, it's up there. Like it bumped from a 9 to a 9.5 like yesterday. So who knows?
Damn, we should have put it off another day.
Well, 2 years later, I think the smallest gap between releases since Adrenaline and Around the Fur. We have 2 years later. We have No Yokan, Deftones' seventh album. Yeah, numbers. What are they? Yeah.
How do they work?
Yeah. So No Yokan. So I did, as you probably have noticed, I have been reading notes for these albums so far. I got up to my note taking and I finished the notes for Diamond Eyes, and I tried to sit down and write notes for No Yokan, and of course Gore by extension. But I just kind of one factor was that I was kind of running out of time, because I do that a lot. I leave things till close to the deadline. But another thing was just that I was really struggling to put into words exactly how much I value the experience of No Yokan every time I put it on. The first time I listened to it, it was immediately apparent that it was going to be one of my favorite Deftones albums. The second time I listened to it, it became clear that it was my favorite Deftones album. And the third time I listened to it, I wasn't certain that I needed any other albums. How do we keep leveling up? How do we?
I mean,
we hit the. I thought I hit the ceiling on White Pony in terms of my ability to translate praise, without just being too ridiculously over the top. But the ceiling is 50 miles down now, and I'm in the stratosphere, and this album actually feels like being suspended in air, and wandering through stormy clouds and then eventually you're just kind of cast into space, and you're just floating through the ether. Yeah, it's remarkable how good this is, considering the pedigree of everything that came before it. You immediately kick things off with Swerve City. How do we go this hard? I have nothing but the utmost respect for kicking your follow-up to Diamond Eyes off with a song that hits 10 instantly. Who needs these, fade-ins or intros? Let's just fucking pummel everyone. And the beautiful thing about Swerve City is that it's such a perfect introduction to the song. It goes to a few different places. It has hooks for days. It's addictive. The vocals are really catchy. And it accomplishes this all in 2 minutes and 40-odd seconds.
It's about horse girls, I think. The ones you went to high school with them. And they're just obsessed with horses.
You know what? Good for them. After listening to this song, you know what? I'll take it. Look,
that was the stupidest joke I've ever made. That
I want to be able to identify multi-track runs that I enjoy on this album, but the fact is, this is the greatest 11-track run of all time.
Yeah.
Like, there are certainly songs that I love, like, that tower for me above, like, other tracks. Like, there are definitely songs I like more than others, but there's no song on here that loses the energy for me, that comes off comparatively weak. There were songs that used to, but basically every single song that I've kind of thought, this is not as good as the other stuff, has eventually grown on me. And I'm just sitting here like, okay, fine. They're all great. What do you fucking want from me? Like, Romantic Dreams is just this fantastic second track. Like, it just is, again, it just marries that dreamier, beautiful sound. It has this kind of like gentle kind of ascending and descending like little chord progression that immediately kind of hooks you. And then the song is just so beautifully crisp and hard hitting. Like, this is the thing. I think this is the best produced Deftones album. Not that there isn't competition, but this is the album where you really get that the spaciousness of the sound feels like, you know, cavernous, but at the same time nothing gets lost in that cavernous space. It's all very hard hitting. It's dreamy, it's beautiful, it's complex. Like, no better example than third track Leathers, which has this gorgeous ambient intro, and then another example of them borrowing from the Mogwai book, incidentally, because Mogwai are a band that love to do jump scares, but the jump scare in Leathers,
do it.
The jump scare in Leathers is like,
I wouldn't call it a jump scare. I'd call it a jump orgasm.
It's like, if I'm ever constipated, I just need to listen to Leather.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a jump scare, but it's like the jump scare in Exorcist 3.
Oh, great comparison.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Great comparison.
It's just the best.
Yeah, I would say the only way in which that comparison falters is that, like, the Exorcist 3, you're expecting a jump scare, you just don't quite get it when you're thinking it'll be, and you don't get exactly what it turns out to be. Whereas here, what's so brutal about Leathers is that you're not expecting a jump scare at all. There's no tension there. Yeah. It's just a beautiful plaintive ambient piece that suddenly Chino is screaming on top of. But anyway, let's move past that, because the song itself is amazing. There's so much to love about Leathers. It has one of my favorite choruses ever, actually, in a Deftones song. Like, it just, the way that Chino sings is just, he's kind of like constantly ratcheting up and ascending vocally, and until eventually he's just like, his vocals are just kind of like ringing over the mix, and then he's got backing vocals that come underneath it as well, and then you get this kind of like pre-chorus or bridge where like everything gets really intense again, and he's screaming on top of it, and it's like, basically, I think this is the perfect single, and I believe this was the lead single to No Yokan, and what a statement of purpose it is. Like, anyone who had ever doubted that Deftones would reach the level of musical complexity, but also immediacy of emotion of White Pony, is eating their fucking words when they listen to this song. Poltergeist is great and underrated as well. I love the kind of hand clap intro to this song. That's such a strange choice that you wouldn't expect for a Deftones track. But also, like, it just...
There's something so satisfying about the way it sounds.
Yeah, it's really kind of like, for lack of a better word, the mix and the kind of tone on this song is quite ugly, but it's like, it just works. It's ugly but pretty. Like, the guitar sounds really gnarled and just kind of like, I don't know enough about guitar to properly describe the tone, but it's very, very unsettling in a good way.
I mean, I don't know, like, I know that Stephen Carpenter uses 8-string guitars, which obviously the lower tuned strings on that instrument are quite large. Yeah. But, you know, it sounds like he's playing it with the things that go up the sides of bridges. I mean, like, how do you
Wow, what a comparison. I love that.
Like,
it's just so massive.
Oh,
it's only because ever since I started playing guitar, every time I go across a suspension bridge, I look at those and I'm like, that's just giant guitar strings. I mean, they're wound exactly the same way. It's
yeah,
one pillar of metal with steel coiled around it.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. And I mean, like, if this weren't enough, then you get to Entombed. And it's almost like you want the album to
to stop being so good.
because it's like, this is unfair. You're making everyone else look bad.
He's already dead.
Like the vocals on this song are fucking unbelievable. I mean, I want to see the shapes and colors that are all that Chino is seeing in this song, because I'm sure they're the best shapes and the best colors that have ever possibly existed. That made no sense. Whatever. Great song.
Synesthesia type beat.
It's I mean, I'll skip over it because I'm sure one of you will probably have plenty to say about that song. I love the way that the that's kind of a slower song, so I love the way that the pace is again kind of picked up with Graphic Nature, which I think is another kind of underrated song on the album.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of like unique things to say about it, but it just really kind of is perfectly pitched and hits just the way it needs to. And then you get to Tempest.
Oh.
And it's
Yeah.
again, you see what I mean about like the ceiling for my praise being miles below me, because we haven't even, I mean, Tempest, I'm going to talk about Tempest, but even when I'm done talking about Tempest, we still won't have talked about my favorite song on this album. But Tempest is remarkable. I love the sense of space in this song, the atmosphere in this song, the dreaminess of it. I love the way that it goes from that kind of plaintive opening, which again evokes that feeling of kind of like drifting through space, and then the riff comes in about a minute in, and it's like suddenly gravity hits you and you're falling, and it's just it's so
love
good.
That.
And I love the tone in this song, the way that the guitar goes dum 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 dum.
That's some Devin Townsend shit.
Yeah, that's fucking exactly what it reminds me of. And it's like it's got a weird kind of effect on it that you don't normally hear in like a Deftones song. Anyway, like I love when they put like kind of like not effects that kind of jump out at you or like are really jarring, but they just put these kind of little effects on their guitars you wouldn't expect occasionally that add a lot of character to the way the riff sounds. But yeah, such a brilliant song. And then Gore's is awesome too. One of the harder hitting songs on the record, just
rips.
It has that similar kind of like ugly, distorted guitar tone that Poltergeist has. But it's more kind of battering, even more battering than that song is.
Gnarlier.
Deep breath. Rosemary.
Oh, here we go. Here it is.
Rosemary. What?
The greatest chord ever played.
What? What has been... Barbara. Huh?
I agree. I
It
wholeheartedly
sounded so
agree.
desperate. Bubba.
What is happening? Why? How? What? Is this... I think this is the longest Deftones song. No, sorry. Pink Maggot's longer. But this is...
Yeah, it is.
This is one of the longest Deftones songs.
Yeah, almost 7 minutes.
And it just makes the most of every second of it. It just starts, again, like so many tracks on this record do, it starts with that kind of dreamy tone, or this time you're getting a little bit of a tiny chord progression over it that's a bit playful. And then Chino's vocals come in, and it's that same beautiful, dreamy tone he's been doing throughout the whole record. And then the riffs come in over the chorus, and I mean, I don't know what to say, because it's not like it's not like it warrants different words than other songs we've talked about. It just somehow manages to be better. And then
It warrants the Pitchfork Kid A review.
it warrants the Pitchfork Kid A review, except it's just this song.
Yeah.
And like you're like, okay, wow, this is something special, right? These riffs are towering but beautiful, and you get a real nice balance between their heaviness and the atmospherics of the song. And Chino's voice is kind of like this guiding light that's kind of bringing you through the middle of it beautifully. And then it kind of gets a bit gentler again in the mid piece, and then you get this. Then he does the chorus again, but it's more intense this time. But not like in the sense that it's harsher. It's just more intense in the sense that he's singing more loudly, still with that kind of melodic chorus singing. And then you get what I can only describe as the 4:14 moment in Rosemary. Because I don't have words to describe it except for when it happens in the song. And I can't. Fuck off. How is this not even my favorite Deftones song? That's what I'm asking myself. But then I forget about other Deftones songs, because who needs them when this one exists?
That's true. That's fair.
Like the band could have. What I can say about Deftones is they could have made only this album, and I would love them as much as I love them.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight on their other albums by comparison, because I mean every bit of praise I've given them. But this is such an achievement, while remarkably not really altering a whole lot. Like, this is definitely their most atmospheric, their most fulsome in terms of mixes, and their most expansive sounding record yet. So it is definitely a progression from Diamond Eyes. Like, you can sense there is an evolution there, but it's not like it sounds completely unique either. It's just like all of the best elements of the records that have led up to this are kind of just all infused perfectly here and into just an absolutely impeccable series of songs. Rosemary is the clear highlight, but by no means does the album drop off there. Goon Squad is, I mean, if I had to pick a least favorite, it might be this one, but even then I don't even want to do that, because I love Goon Squad. I think it's really fun, but it's also kind of like adding new kind of timbres to their sound as well, because it has these. It's another track where you get this extended kind of gentle ambient opening, but then the riff comes in, and instead of being hammering, it's like bubbling, and it's kind of simmering gently, and then you get the heaviness. When again, it's not quite like a jump scare on the same level of Leathers, but it is surprising, like the way that they managed to make the arrival of something that's very recognizably Deftones still surprising, because you weren't expecting it. It's such a good song, and it's, again, you get really ferocious vocal performances here, but continued devotion to the melodic core of the album that really sets it apart and makes it in many ways one of the most accessible Deftones albums. And then the album closes with What Happened to You, which is just an awesome closer. I underrated this song for a long time. It's really good.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's quite short, but it just, and again, it's like, it just sounds so good. I love the clattering tone of the drums on this song. Like, it kind of puts you on edge, and it kind of contrasts with the dreamy tone of it a little bit. And I just love, again, the vocals here. The vocals in this song are so beautiful. Like, they're so tonally weird and pretty and lovely, and it's a low-key ending to the album, but it also feels like you're gently landing back on Earth after your journey through space and the atmosphere. Like, it's still totally dreamy, but again, like I said, that clattering beat and the just general pace of the song grounds it, and it's like the cigarette after amazing sex, for that, to take a really easy and cheap comparison. Like, yeah, you
Mid
just,
band.
yeah. I'm annoyed that I couldn't write notes to have more fully formed thoughts here, but at the same time, I do feel like I've done this record justice.
Well, I mean, I don't think anything you could write like would get at this album's appeal as accurately as you just did.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, because I've probably I've done a track by track on every song here, so I've probably left you with little to say, but I want to hear everything you think regardless, because I love this album. I love sharing the love of this album I have with other people. I love that it exists, and I'm fucking flabbergasted that there are other albums that are basically as good as it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
I'll just go ahead and jump in to say, I think, I said about Diamond Eyes that it is the ideal Deftones record. It is the dream Deftones record. And that leaves Koi no Yokan in sort of a funny position, because it is every bit as good as Diamond Eyes. So it's like, the thinking that I've come around on it is basically that if Diamond Eyes is the ideal Deftones record, Koi no Yokan is the definitive Deftones record. It's just them firing on all cylinders, nothing held back, all of it flawlessly executed. Just, I mean, the thing about Tyler's little spiel just then is like, it sounds hyperbolic when you haven't heard the album, and then you hear it, and then it's like, I mean, if anything, you may have been underselling it a little bit, because sweet and gentle Lord,
sweet and gentle Lord, baby Jesus,
don't it just butter my biscuits real good. Just again, flawless.
flawless
Victory. Not a weak second, not a weak cymbal crash, not a note misplaced. Yes to all of this, always.
I mean, look, I do understand being reticent to this album, because I mean, it is different. If you discount the fucking silence on Around the Fur, that I'm pretty sure this is the longest Deftones album. So I mean, it does require, I think, you to have a taste for them when they do let their sound kind of expand and go a little bit more slower, because I think generally this might be the slowest Deftones album as well, in terms of having a larger proportion of songs that are kind of more mid-tempo, comparatively anyway, in terms of their discography. There's still plenty of hard hitters here, obviously. So it does, I think, require a little bit of patience if you're coming at this from like a head-banging metal perspective. But why, I mean, not to pick on her, but I have no idea why Saoirse, of all people, gave this a 7 out of 10. I thought that she would have loved this, so I don't want to assume that anyone will love anything anymore. I just want people to listen to it.
Except that you can assume that the three of us will love a Deftones record. That's the only thing in this life that is certain. Death, taxes, and Deftones. I mean, this album is why I have complete faith in them, no matter what they do for the rest of their career, that if it isn't better than what they did before, it will at least be interesting in the ways that it isn't. Like, because they're never going to disappoint me. I don't think that's physically possible. Because, I mean, like, think Rush has a streak of albums that are as good as Around the Fur to Gore, and maybe that's it.
Yeah, really.
But it's just unmatched, perfect, and my absolute favorite Deftones track, Entombed.
Yes.
I mean,
Insert the song here.
Yeah, just if you don't listen to it and love it, don't speak to me. I don't
hate
want
you, and I hate your mom.
I do not wish to know you or your kind. It's just, I mean, I think lyrically, the song in its most literal interpretation is about parenthood, early parenthood. And I mean, it's heart-wrenching in that sense already. But then you consider it in the context of losing a friend that you've had for, 20 years or however long they knew each other. And it's absolutely devastating. And it doesn't help things. And by that, I mean, it really helps things that the track is just, the music itself is maybe the most gorgeous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, some of Carpenter's best guitar work, I think easily Moreno's best vocal performance. Abe Cunningham doesn't get to go off like he does on some songs, but he's the absolute backbone of the song, and he plays exactly where he is needed and plays those places exceptionally well.
I think as well, just if we're speaking about Abe Cunningham, like his drumming on Swerve City is like instrumental to like the effect that has as an album opener.
Oh, absolutely. No, that the reason the guitar and bass on that song sound so propulsive and earth-shattering is because of the drums.
Yeah, totally.
And it's the GOAT. The GOAT. Ah, Jesus Christ. I mean, there's no way to speak on this album without being hyperbolic. Which, I mean, as people who have sat here to dive into these albums in detail, is in a sense deeply frustrating because you want to do the album every bit of justice that you can in as many words as is needed. But really, the only words you need are 4. Go listen to it.
Beautifully said. Jake.
Gentle mic drop.
Well, I have the monolithic task of having to talk about this after you two, who have done an astonishing job at illustrating why this album is great. And I mean, I hate to be a broken record, and I hate to not be a cool kid with a unique opinion, but this is my fucking favorite Deftones album. And I think the core of why Tyler I think the core of why is it because it blends everything about their sound that I like the best. It is spacious and dreamy, and yet it will absolutely fucking pummel you when you are not looking. It is an album that if you take your attention away from it and go astray for even a single solitary moment, you will come back and suffer severe whiplash because the album has kicked your ass while you are not looking. I think that this is just generally, like, the fact that this is not considered on the level of Diamond Eyes or White Pony by, like, the public at large is not only baffling, but like egregious in a
Blatant,
failure to recognize
blatant misinformation.
I will
blatant
say,
disrespect.
I will say,
Chicaners.
I will
Deceitful.
say, as a credit to this website, Rate Your Music has it as the second highest rated Deftones album.
Ooh, Rate Your Music takes a W home tonight. But that's just the thing about this album, is that it also gives you everything you didn't know that you wanted from a Deftones record. I feel like Diamond Eyes is like what, like if I want to listen to a Deftones album, that's the one I go to. But when I want to listen to the Deftones album, this is what I go to. I think that this has some of the best production on any metal album I have ever heard. It is sublime. I think the reason that I underrated this album initially is because it is an album that does demand your full attention in order to fully appreciate the scope of what's going on here and the orders of magnitude that the scope of the soundscapes that they are dealing with have here. It is a monumental feat of production. I think that, like, it is maybe, like I said, Diamond Eyes is the most consistent, whereas I think this is the album with the best flow and ebb to it. It is the most satisfying listen that you get from a Deftones album. And again, I have to repeat a sentiment that's already been stated here, but Entombed. Entombed. It is the best song the band has made to date in a catalog of exceptional work. It is a thrilling song that manages to not even be like one of the highest energy songs on the record. It is just a crushing, both thematically and sonically, song. And the fact that it's just like when you get to a song like this, you're just like, well, I mean, I guess I'm just gonna have to like accept the fact that the rest of the album just, you know, it won't be here. And then Graphic Nature starts, and then it feeds into Tempest. And Tempest, I mean, what an aptly named song. You feel like you are being thrown into a fucking hurricane and shocked by lightning. And Gauze, deeply underrated Deftones track. Supremely underrated Deftones track. One of the heaviest songs on the record. And then Tyler's absolutely orgasmic reaction to Rosemary almost doesn't even do that song justice, as it is like, this is an album that feels almost progressive metal levels of the way that it structures its songs and riffs to build and just absolutely decimate upon themselves. It crashes into itself in the most beautifully chaotic of ways. And Goon Squad and What Happened to You is just like, it is a perfect way to end the record considering the energy that came before it. I feel like it flows very nicely. It doesn't end it with either a whisper or a bang, but it more brings you onto a level where you're just like, it sets you back to like, you feel like you are discovering what like the atmosphere and oxygen are again. You feel like you are remembering how to breathe. You're coming down, and it's gorgeous. And like, this is just when I want to like metal as a genre, when I think of what it is capable of, when I think of its limitations, but also of its many advantages and what it can do with its sound, I think No Yokan may be one of the most utilitarian metal records ever fucking recorded, because of how well it is able to take advantage of every single piece of what it makes. And it just does so and combines in the most beautiful of ways. It's one of the most chaotic and also most sublimely put together records in a way that just does not feel like it should be congruous, and yet somehow is. And I fucking adore it. It is a mature record that I feel like their career was building up to. I feel like it helps if you are going through their discography chronologically to appreciate what they are doing here, as it is not the immediate listen that Diamond Eyes and White Pony is. But it is the biggest grower that they have, and I cannot get enough of it. Each time I listen to it, it sounds like I am hearing it again for the first time, and I cannot stress how fresh and just absolutely euphoric of a feeling that is to have when you go back to a record that you remember loving, and it's just like, it's every bit as good as you remember, and I love it. It is the pinnacle of the band, and dare I say, maybe even the pinnacle of the genre.
Ooh.
Whatever genre this is.
Now
Yeah.
that is what I call gospel.
Preach.
So, with all that said and done, let's turn to see what August thinks of this album.
6.
All right. Premonitions of Love, or rather, No Yokan. I mean, damn, that English title sounds lame as hell. I can totally see why they've changed it to that Japanese title. Anyways, this is a rather interesting album in the Deftones catalog because they expanded their stylistic influences quite a bit on this album. You can hear shades of shoegaze, dream pop, and even post-metal. I mean, this is a really diverse collection of sounds going into this record. And I just definitely adore the creative ambition it took to craft an album like this. However, I do find myself thinking a couple of songs run way too long by virtue of being stuffed with too many musical ideas for their own good, like Goon Squad and Tempest come to mind. However, ultimately, the production is so good it makes up for a lot of that. Across all the songs on this album, the mixing and mastering is just fantastic, and there's just generally a stellar dynamic within this record. It contains some really fantastic pieces like Rosemary and Entombed, two of the most beautiful Deftones cuts ever constructed. What seems to be that at least seems to be most of the focus of this album on like a sonic front, creating something that's just simply beautiful. It lacks a bit of the aggression earlier releases have, I won't lie, and it's taken some time to grow on me, and I do find around the 9th or 10th song on the album I start to lose interest. Nonetheless, it's a good album, and I look forward to experiencing it a bit more in the future.
Alright, so we don't have to edit him out of this video altogether.
Yeah, we don't. It will fuck up our standard deviation, but who cares?
What did he give it?
Well, you have to wait until it's favorite tracks and ratings time, won't you?
Oh, okay.
Which it is right now. Nah, fuck it. Let's just do August first. August, what are your favorite tracks and rating?
My favorite tracks are Entombed, Swerve City, which I did not mention but is excellent, and Rosemary. My least favorite track would have to be Goon Squad, and I'd give this album a 7.5 out of 10.
Too low.
Alright,
fine. We'll deal. Okay. Jake, you go next.
All right, well, my favorite song, shockingly, unexpectedly, is Entombed. Second favorite song, shockingly, unexpectedly, Rosemary. And my third favorite song, shockingly, unexpectedly, Swerve
get on
City.
with it! Yes, get on with it!
My least favorite song is I Don't Fucking Care, and my rating is a 10.
Exactly.
It's just doing the Monty Python bit. You don't have to mock me. We're all having fun here. You shut your whore mouth.
Shut it for me, bitch.
Oh, don't think I won't. I don't feel like driving over there. Shit. At any rate,
Morgan, what are your favorite songs?
My favorite songs are Entombed, Rosemary, and it's between Swerve City and Tempest, and yes, both of them. And my least favorite is 7 Words. And
My least favorite is August Nelson.
Hey, still not the worst take that's been in this video.
Very true. And your rating is.
What do you fucking think?
Well, you gotta say it.
11.
Okay, 10 out of 10.
Okay, they did make 10 louder on this one.
They did.
They did, as they should.
So my 3 favorite tracks are Rosemary. I'm gonna put Leathers in second, and third is Entombed. Exactly.
Sorry.
And I don't have a least favorite track. That's stupid. It's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it would be stupid.
Yes.
Okay, so we take a bit of a gap here. Year-wise,
Yeah.
again, we go back to 4 years, which it looks like they're sticking to because it's been 4 years since this next one. But yeah, we come back in 2016 with Gore. I'll let you guys talk about Gore.
Gore is the album with the flamingos on it. And honestly, it's probably their least appropriately named record, as Gore marks a bit of a shift in their sonic direction, focusing a bit more on their spacier, shoegazier sound, sort of No Yokan, sort of the middle ground of their harder stuff and their softer stuff, whereas this is a bit more leaning in that direction. And
it almost
Gore,
feels like a heavy new wave album to me.
You know, I do not disagree with that assessment at all, honestly. As somebody who listened to it quite recently for this, it is a rather unusual record, but it is notable for being as lowly rated, at least on Sputnik Music, as Adrenaline. It is an album that is considered quite contentious, and I will say, for good reason, it is not an album that I think is easy to adjust yourself to for multiple reasons, but I want to come to the defense of poor Gore here and say that I think that Gore is a spectacular record in many, many ways, mostly, and that I just think a lot of the ideas and songs and structures here have found a great balance in their sound. It is a direction that I am glad that they ended up taking, much like other records before it. I think this record has outstanding highlights that tower even over some of the band's most monolithic achievements, like, of course, the ever spectacular song, fucking Phantom Bride, which has maybe the best guitar fucking solo on their career ever.
Thank you, Jerry Cantrell.
Yeah, who contributes to this track in
I'm
beautiful
sorry.
ways.
What?
Did you not know?
No.
That's yeah.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it's listed on the Apple Music feature for
It is
for
not.
him.
It is not on Spotify.
Jerry Cantrell plays the guitar solo in Phantom Bride.
He absolutely does.
Oh my god!
Can't believe I knew that before Morgan.
I can't believe I knew that before Morgan. That's maybe the most surprising thing.
I can't wait to watch this back when I first say that and watch Morgan's face.
Well, obviously, it is a significant contribution, as the work here is outstanding, and Phantom Bride is legitimately I won't even say top 3, it is a top 2 Deftones track, because it is absolutely quintessential and just rips you apart. It is a caustic song that in many ways it kind of towers over the songs that surround it, but in the best possible of ways. I think the album has a great vibe to it. I think that it maybe doesn't strike a balance in its energy as well as Koi no Yokan, but then again, what does? I think that it opens relatively kind of weak compared to the strides that it hits. I think Prayers Triangles is a fine way to open it, but I think Acid Hologram is a much better song. Then going into Doomed User, which is also great. Geometric Headdress falls in a little bit just because I think I'll just sort of put to the side why I think this song is not as great. Heart's Wires, fantastic song. Patura Infamante is a good song. But Xenon and El Merle, I don't fucking know or care how you're supposed to say that. Great. The title track, decent. Phantom Bride, amazing. Rubicon, solid closer. So by that impression, you might say that I would think this is a very consistent record. However, the main problem with this album that unfortunately does come to bite it rather significantly, and I listened to this when I was a bit earlier in my music development, so this did not leap out at me as prominently as it did now, in that it is compressed. And that is a capital C in compressed. I mean, I went directly from listening to Koi no Yokan to this album, and when you, like, the instant the first track starts, it's just like, why does this sound like they put this track in a box? Why does this sound like that?
You know what's most infuriating about this? And this might, if you don't already know this, I don't know whether you will or not, but if you don't, this will shock you. This was engineered and produced by the same person who engineered and produced Koi no Yokan.
They sent the wrong files to Spotify.
I'm sorry. He what?
Reanimator type beat.
Well, like,
that just makes
one song and they
sense
fixed
to me.
it. Here it's like very pervasive.
This is,
it's a decision.
It's clearly an intentional one, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm not saying that this album would go from being like good to great if the compression was changed, but I am saying the album would be considerably better if that was the case, because the instrumentation on this is genuinely impressive, but it is so claustrophobic. Everything together in the mix it's strangling each other, and not in a way that feels like it is showing up in the music in a way that is evoking something. This should be the kind of album that is spacious. It should envelop you. It should swallow you. It should be mixed like diamond eyes, and for some reason
I will just clarify as well. This Koi no Yokan was produced and engineered by the same person who produced and engineered this, but it had a different mixer than this album does. Koi no Yokan was mixed by Rich Costi, who's a fantastic mixer who has done a number of like the best records of all time, like Silent Alarm, Francis the Mute, Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me.
What the fuck?
All right,
yeah.
All right, Mr. Costi, you can.
But for some reason,
settle down.
They couldn't get him for this one, which is a shame.
He just said top 20.
Yeah. Anyway, just a side note to clarify that there is a big distinction between the two records in terms of personnel.
It's a good fundamentals album, and it's a clear exploration of a corner of their sound that previously remained unexplored, and I do think it is a good album, and I genuinely, like, even its lowest points, I still think are good. I wouldn't say there is a song on here that I would point out as being, like, significantly worse than the others. That said, it is genuinely disheartening and disappointing that it is not, because this could be in, like, just edging out into the upper tier of their discography, and unfortunately, it just kind of dips right below the midline, and that's quite disappointing. Like, I would love to hear a remastering of this or
totally
something, but it's like listening to it it's kind of painful in a way where you're just like, what could have been. As is, though, it's a great record. I would put it on par with the self-titled. I'd say that I slimly prefer it to the self-titled just because I do think it is more consistent, but I can easily see why the compression would absolutely hamper your enjoyment of it, but it is something that is worth a try nonetheless.
Yeah. I'm going to get my thoughts out of the way since I suspect Morgan will have a more informed opinion than me, because this is
Well,
easily...
evidently not.
Well, with that one exception. But I just mean that this is easily the Deftones record I have spent the least amount of time... Oh, besides Adrenaline, I guess. It's the good
I'll agree
Deftones
with you
album
there,
I've
too.
spent the least amount of time with, even though I have given it multiple listens. I like it for the most part. I share the same criticisms with the production. I think maybe it bugs me maybe even a little bit more, because I certainly wouldn't rank it that highly in terms of if I had to order their albums. I like when Morgan said that it sounds like a kind of heavy new wave album. I was like, oh wow, that I'd never thought of that. But then thinking about the opening track, Prayers Triangles, it does kind of have a new wave feel.
Yeah.
So that's such a great comparison, or such a great description. It's a pretty good song too.
The shame of it is it's just not as amazing as that sounds.
Yeah, that's certainly not a vibe that's consistent across the record, but I think it is apropos. I really like the song Acid Hologram. I think it's one of the stronger ones here. It's really, really heavy, and you do feel the compression, but it's just really love the riffs in this song, and I love the vocals and the riffs and the way they kind of interplay in this song. It's super addictive. I adore it. Doomed User is all right too. Geometric Headdress is, I think, the biggest and most egregious example of the production ruining what could have been an otherwise stellar song. It's just brick-walled. Yeah. It's just what it is. It's brick-walled, and it's tragic. Heart's Wires is very good too. I don't have a hot take about that song. I do think, though, this may just be a consequence of me not having spent enough time with the record. I do think, though, that after Heart's Wires, it kind of dips a bit. Like Patura and Fementi, Xenon and El Merle kind of just blur together in my memory, and I'm fully prepared to concede that may just be that I haven't spent enough time with it, but I don't really remember much about them. The last three tracks, though, I think are stellar, really strong closing trio, particularly Phantom Bride. It's just so easily the best song here.
Yep.
Even if the rest of it were magnificently produced.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's just what it is it's a great song. And the guitar solo just stupidly good. Like, yeah.
I mean, it rips you apart.
Yeah. I mean, nothing makes me want to listen to Alice in Chains more than hearing the Jerry Cantrell's guitar solo there.
I was about to say, Jerry Cantrell's the only person on my favorite guitar solos list twice, but then I remembered Alex Lifeson is on there like 8 times, so never mind.
Well, there you go. You might have to add, I'm guessing you're going to be adding a third one now to your list now that you know that Cantrell is responsible for this.
No, I mean, Phantom Bride was already on that list. I just didn't know he played it.
Yeah.
I thought it was freaking Carpenter. Like that was the one time he came out of hiding for the making of this record.
Yeah. No, there's actually that's a notable point as well worth stating, is that Carpenter was like, he was physically present, but he was mentally absent during the recording sessions for this record. And I think there's a quote from Chino which says basically like, Stephen came up to me when we were finishing the record and he said, "Hey, I'm really sorry that I haven't really contributed that much." And it was like, okay, thank you for saying that. We're not going to record a whole new album at this point. But basically it was an acknowledgement that they realized the record could have been better than it was, which I'm hoping means that Ohms will be light years ahead of this. But I still think it's a good album. It just, I don't know, I find with how effusive my praise has been for so many other Deftones records, I find it hard to really want to stick up for it, just because, they've set the bar so high themselves that, it's a quandary of their own making. But like I said, I think the record ends really strong. I also really like Rubicon as a closer. I think it's one of their best closers. And yeah, it's a good record. It could have been better, but it's no sense dwelling on what could have been, unless they decide to remaster it. There's about half this record is great, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the second worst Deftones record. Which is, not a hot take, but it also means almost nothing because they have one album that isn't spectacular, and it's just mid. So I do think this is a very strong record. I honestly kind of like how compressed it is in some cases, particularly on Acid Hologram. That's the one that comes to mind. I think it just fits the tone that song is laying down. Other times it is egregiously misplaced. Like Geometric Headdress it just completely ruins the song altogether. And like to a degree there where like I don't know if the song would even be good if it wasn't so compressed. I just barely know what it sounds like as a product. It's just kind of it's just tainted by it wholly. But there's also stuff like Heart's Wires, which I absolutely love. And I think Prayers Triangles is all right. It's all right. It suffers from the production complaints, but I don't think it's a hugely fantastic song besides that. Yeah. It's just good. And like obviously Phantom Bride. Guitar solo. Gerald Cantrell.
I love how basic we sound when we're like Phantom Bride guitar solo, but like really, you just when you listen to it, you're like, you know what? That's
you're just like the first verse, you're just like, well, that was cool, and then the second one happens, and you're like,
yep,
bruh,
yep, bruh. Comfortably the second best Jerry Cantrell guitar solo, which is a massively difficult thing to be.
What's the first? Just out of curiosity. Fair. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what? Okay. I'm gonna make sure I go back and listen to the Alice in Chains albums, the early ones, this week.
The ones that matter, you mean?
I was just like, did they have anything but early ones? But then I remembered they've released albums with William what's his face,
not Lane Staley.
Yeah. Self-titled, massively underrated, fantastic record. Anyway, yeah, this is just very much a mixed bag of a record. Gore is, but it just so happens that a Deftones mixed bag is like, I got a whole bunch of candy bars that I love for Halloween, and I got some candy corn, but I can just toss the candy corn out, so who gives a shit?
Good comparison.
I'm not sure that it is, but I feel like I kind of belabored that one.
I thought so.
Well, thank you.
Very good. Okay. Well, let's now turn to August and see what August thinks of Gore by the Deftones.
4 out of 10.
More like bore.
If that's not in his review, I'm going to be
I'm
disappointed.
Gore. Well, Gore. Gore is an album of a lot of good song ideas that are ruined by the one thing that saved so many cuts on the last album, production. The mixing and production on Gore is just muddy as shit. Nothing seems to really take charge of the songs, and as a result, a lot of them end up feeling directionless. I mean, there are certainly attempts at ideas on this album, some of which pan out, like Prayers, Triangles, and Hearts and Wires, but then you get stuff like Xenon, which is an absolutely muddy bore of a song that's just lost within its own mix. In a sense, it kind of reminds me of Death Magnetic, being an album completely screwed by its production, and I feel bad I kind of have to end on a weak note.
Well, technically, we don't.
Yeah, we don't. We don't have to end on this. Well, we have to end for today. But we are going to be reviewing Ohms, which comes out tantalizingly soon at the end of this month.
And the single
next
week.
Great.
The single, the title track is it's a good song. By that,
all right, August.
That's a scorcher right there.
No. I'm being deliberately understating here. It's great. It's a fucking fantastic song. Anyway, let's move into our favorite tracks and ratings. August, you can go first.
My favorite tracks are Prayers, Triangles, Hearts and Wires, and probably Acid Hologram. Least favorite is Xenon. I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
No Phantom Bride? What in the fucking shit?
Yeah,
I don't think he listened to it.
Yeah, he just couldn't finish the album. All right, Morgan, why don't you go next?
My 3 favorite tracks are Phantom Bride, Hearts, Wires, and Acid Hologram. And my least favorite is Geometric Headdress. And I'm feeling a light 8 out of 10.
Cool. I will go next. My 3 favorite tracks are Acid Hologram, Rubicon, and my favorite being Phantom Bride. And I will give this album I'm going to stick with a 7 out of 10 for now, but I recognize that it will likely increase somewhat with time. Jake.
Well, my favorite song is Phantom Bride. My second favorite song is probably Acid Hologram, and then what was that? Did somebody make a disapproving noise there, or was that just me?
No, that was just you.
Okay, I mean, I'm crazy. And then Hearts, Wires. Least favorite track, probably Geometric Headdress. And I give it a tentative 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Awesome. And that is the discography of Deftones. Now, before we end, we move into our
discography ranking and
our
10 favorite
discography
songs.
ranking and 10 favorite tracks. So what I'll do, I think we'll get August to go first. So August, why don't you give us your album ranking and your top 10 Deftones songs?
My favorite Deftones songs are At Number 10 and Going Down, Hole in the Earth, Passenger, Change in the House of Flies, Around the Fur, Swerve City, Diamond Eyes, Entombed, Be Quiet and Drive, Cherry Waves, and my favorite Deftones song would be Sex Tape. Now, my ranking for the Deftones studio chronology: at number 8, Adrenaline; at number 7, Gore; at number 6, Deftones; at number 5, Saturday Night Wrist; at number 4, No Yokan; at number 2, White Pony; at number 3, Diamond Eyes; and at number 1, Around the Fur.
That's
It's a
quite
very
good,
respectable
honestly.
list.
Respectable.
Yeah.
Understandable. Have a nice day.
All right, you two are the biggest Deftones fans, so you two can go last. I'll do mine next. Well, not biggest necessarily, but the longest time Deftones fans. My album ranking is 8 Adrenaline, 7 Gore, 6 Saturday Night Wrist, 5 Deftones, 4 Around the Fur, 3 Diamond Eyes, 2 White Pony, and 1 No Yokan. And I'm gonna, because fuck you, I can do what I want, I'm gonna do a top 20 songs list. And if you don't like that, then that's too bad. You don't feel like you have to as well, but I'm just doing it because I wanted to.
Well, I want to, so
okay.
Fuck you.
Well, you better hurry up and get to work. At 20, Good Morning Beautiful, 19, Around the Fur. 18, Beauty School. 17, Diamond Eyes. 16, Tempest. 15, Hole in the Earth. 14, Entombed. 13, Phantom Bride. 12, Change. 11, Swerve City. 10, Beware. 9, Hexagram. 8, Leathers. 7, My Own Summer, parentheses, Shove It. 6, Circes. 5, Digital Bath. 4, Sex Tape. This hurts. 3, Rosemary.
Oh.
2, When Girls Telephone Boys. And my favorite Deftones song, of course, is Be Quiet and Drive.
Be Quiet and Drive.
Far Away. Jake, do you want to go next?
Yeah. My discography ranking is, in last place we have Adrenaline. In second to last place we have Saturday Night Wrist. In third to last place we have Gore, the self-titled. Then we have Gore. Then Around the Fur. Then White Pony. Then Diamond Eyes. And then Koi no Yokan. And my top 10, I'm going to include some honorable mentions, because even I couldn't narrow it down to just 10. Honorable mentions. Their cover of Drive. Diamond Eyes, the title track. My Own Summer, Shove It. Hexagram, and Xerxes. Top 10. 10, we have Needles and Pins. 9, Digital Bath. 8, Be Quiet and Drive. 7, Swerve City. 6, Rosemary. 5, Sex Tape. 4, Elite. 3, Rocket Skates. 2, Phantom Bride. And 1, Entombed.
Beautiful. Yeah, I feel bad for not mentioning Phantom Bride in my top 20, but I think, again, I just need to listen to that record more. I love it. Like, it's definitely a 10 out of 10 song, but I need to spend more time with the record.
I was sure to say it's definitely a 10 out of 10 record. And I was just like, Tyler, you're a fucking liar.
Yeah. It's Morgan, how you going?
I want to be a wild card and throw in their cover of Simple Man by Leonard Skinner, but just
please.
They really?
I've not heard that, but you should not.
It's pretty great.
Wish they did Better Man instead.
That reminds me of when Shoo Shoo covered Sharp Dressed Man by ZZ Top.
That's good.
And it was better than the original.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean,
obviously.
Come on.
All right, so at number 20, we have Command Control. Fuck you, Tyler.
Yeah.
19, Rocket Skates. 18, Cherry Waves. 17, Mine. 16, When Girls Telephone Boys. 15, Sex Tape. 14, Beauty School. 13, Swerve City. 12, Knife Party. 11, the cover of If Only Tonight We Could Sleep that they performed at MTV's special on The Cure.
Holy shit.
Have any of you guys heard that?
No.
But I fucking love that song.
I'm still processing what you just said.
You should find it as soon as you can. Number 10, Royal. 9, Rosemary. 8, Phantom Bride. 7, Be Quiet and Drive. 6, Smile, the Eros song. 5, Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event. 4, Elite. 3, Xerxes. 2, Digital Bath. And 1, Entombed. And for the albums, at number 8, Adrenaline. 7, Gore. 6, self-titled. 5, Around the Fur. 4, White Pony. 3, Saturday Night Wrist. 2, Koi no Yokan. And 1, Diamond Eyes. And I was thinking earlier when we were talking about them, I think there's a distinct possibility that if I had heard Koi no Yokan before Diamond Eyes, that I would like it more. It's really the only thing separating the two in terms of my perception of them is the more emotional, immediate relationship that I have with Diamond Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
pretty
That's fair.
much
That's fair.
pure equals in my eyes.
They're both perfect, so
Yes.
you know.
Well, very much the
tune into
they're
our
very much
later.
the like Still Life into Blackwater Park type beat.
Yeah, that's actually a really great comparison now that I think about it. But
Anyway.
tune into our later episode covering Deftones to see where we will rank Ohms amidst
we will
our
obviously
current
do
ranking.
that. Yeah, that's going to be fun. I can't wait to hear it. I'm smelling...
And to hear
I've got
Saoirse give it a 6.
I've got like this feeling in the back of my spine that we're going to get a new single for the record soon before it comes out. So
that'd be tasty.
We'll see.
I don't know if I want another one though.
That's fair. That is also fair.
I mean, it's only next Friday.
Cool. So thank you for listening. We have done a bunch of episodes where we do discography deep dives on different artists. If you're unaware, please check them out by checking out the channel and the Jam
just
T
did a
podcast
Sufjan
playlist.
Stevens one with Tyler.
I did a Sufjan Stevens one with Saoirse, and the next one we're doing, I believe, is Frightened Rabbit in a couple weeks' time. That's going to be
less fun than this.
Yeah.
That's going to be the least fun thing we ever do.
Well, I mean, don't make it out to be torture. Like, they're great albums. We're going to have
absolutely.
We could always do a brand new
I'm just going to be a wreck.
Oh, totally. Well, look, if it makes you feel any better, which it probably doesn't, but if it makes you feel any less alone, then I'm going to be a wreck with you.
Yay.
But yeah, that's going to be something. But we try to cover a variety of different like genres and styles, even though we do have like our things that we're particularly, that we like particularly much.
I mean, we did skip from Sufjan Stevens to Deftones.
Exactly.
So
and we're going to be reviewing
variety.
a new Sufjan album and a new Deftones album in the same episode.
In the same album.
When we make our next concept album based off the albums we review, of course.
I want to do an Exile on Main Street and Exile in Guyville, but with like the age of ads and Koi no Yokan.
If Sufjan and Deftones made a collaborative record, it would just be a Devin Townsend album.
God, you're fucking right. It would just be Ghost.
Anyway, I'm talking out my ass now. Let us wrap things up and thank you for watching.
Yeah.
And basically that's it. Is there anything else?
I don't get a deadly virus.
Oh God. So thank you for watching. Please. Oh, by the way, I should say, let us know in the comments what your favorite Deftones album is. Let us know what your favorite Deftones songs are. Let us know whether you agree or disagree with our rankings and reviews. Rock over London, rock on Chicago. Shapes, flavor, you can see.